Hello, if you've been here before, welcome back. If not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I like to talk about. This is me ranking 40 books of the Animorph series written by K.A. Applegate. I'm debuting a new setup here. I changed some stuff here. These are cross stitches that I've done while I'm editing. And some displays of movies and books and songs that I like as well. It'll grow as well. And I'm representing animals here with the lobster, the tentacle octopus, bird, and a little penguin as well. So, Animorphs as a series written by K. Applegate and a handful of ghost writers was written from 1996 to 2001, consists of 54 main books in the series, and a handful of other spin-off books. I've wanted to read through the Animorph series ever since I started seeing a lot of people talking about it on Tumblr, talking about how mature and how elevated it is compared to other serialized children's stories. And especially with 54 books in the entire series is a little infamous in the book community. And obviously the covers of the children slowly morphing into hideous morphs to an animal is also really iconic. And a lot of the times when I talk about Animorphs, I use these covers to show like, hey, you remember this type of book? I'm reading that series. Now, I was only able to find, I think up to 7 books at my library. And because there's so many, I didn't really want to buy any of that. But thankfully, I found Audiomorphs, which is a podcast that is a reading of the books run by this guy named Daniel. Shout out to Daniel. He works on this. He's been working on this for a long time. And it was just until the last few months that I caught up to all of his stuff and have continued with his uploads. He's got up to book 35.5 by now. We'll get into the 0.5s, but he's been through a lot of the books, and I've listened through them, all of them, at least once, and I adore this series so much. It is so good. It is much better than I anticipated, because I came in, I was like, I'll read the first 5 books, and if I'm not entertained, if it's too childish, I'll just let it go. I tried, and I can say that I tried reading it, but I couldn't get into it. I was hooked from the 3rd book. I was like, yeah, this is a series that I need to continue, that I need to reach to the end. Unfortunately, like I said, he's only up to book 35, and there's still 20 odd books left. And I'm going to stay loyal to him and not read ahead of him and stay with Daniel, because Daniel's performance, he does it all by himself. He changes his inflection, how his voice is for each of the main characters.
My name is Jake. Just Jake. I can't tell you my last name.
My name is Cassie. I can't tell you my last name. The Yerk danger is too great.
My name is Marco. I've always kind of liked my name. Marco.
My name is Rachel. You want to know my last name? Too bad. I don't give out my last name. My name is Tobias. The other Animorphs can't tell you very much about themselves, but I can. See, I don't have an address.
My name is Examili Eskurth Isthil. I don't know if my fellow Andalites will ever recognize that name.
Adds in some special effects sounds, and sometimes another voice as well. Another person comes in as a guest to voice act, and he puts it out almost every single week. And this man has a full-time job. He just got engaged. He just got a kitten, and he just moved. This man is so busy with his own internal life, and he still carves out time to put out these episodes. And if any of the episodes are delayed, he lets us know as well. And he is just amazing. In the description, I'll put down the Audiomorphs website. I listen through it through Spotify, so I'll put down that list as well as he has a Tumblr, a Gmail. Shout out to him, because I would not have been able to do this video without his incredible work. So go check him out if you actually want to go through the story of Animorphs, because it is amazing. And go listen to his stuff because it is amazing work. So like I said, I'll be ranking 40 books in the Animorph series. That is books 1 to 35, and then 5 spin-off books that I'll touch on when we get there. Those are the 0.5s that I've been alluding to. Also, spoiler alert for, I guess, books 1 through 35 of the Animorph series. Spoiler alert for all of those. And also, like I said, I haven't reached past 35, so no spoilers past book 35 for me, please. Keep that out of the comments. The general story of the Animorphs is that 5 American kids find out that there is an alien invasion of these beings called Yeerks, which are brain slugs that enter into people's minds and take over. Think Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets slugs, you know? The kids are given the morphing technology that allows them to change into different species and use this technology to combat against the invasion of the Yeerks. They're given this technology by an alien enemy of the Yeerk, the Andalite Alfengor. They eventually join up with Alfengor's younger brother, Aximili, Axe, and work together to fight against the Yeerks. It's so good. I really like the writing of the series because it's written for children to simply just pick up and start from wherever. There's many times in the series, in the beginning of the books, that there's a quick little recap about, my name is this, we are fighting the Yeerks, we can turn into an Animorph, etc., which thankfully does get shorter the longer the series goes on. But it's designed for a child to simply just pick up a random book and not need to have read the first few books before it to understand what's happening. As the series continues, there is more and more continuity continuing, which makes the continuation of the series much better because we are starting to learn more and more as we keep going. There are times I feel that if you pick up a book in the latter like 20, 30 number, you will be lost without having more information prior. But a child who is just simply picking up something to just read wouldn't really realize that. And I really like the combination of like writing for children, also having a continuity and having change within the characters and the plot. I will say for a good portion, it is pretty repetitive, but it's helped by the very different activities, missions that they go on. And so the characters are Jake, Rachel, Tobias, Cassie, and Marco, and are soon joined by Aximili Iskareth Istil, also known as Axe. They are the archetypical 5-man band, but a lot of the time, these archetypes are subverted by things that they do. For example, Rachel, who is blonde and white, and a girl, would normally be relegated to the beauty, right? Or the heart. But she is the beauty, but overall, she is the muscle. Cassie is both the heart and the smart one, which having that combination is already subverting something. And traditionally, the archetype would have the leader, in this case Jake, fall in love with the beauty, in this case Rachel. However, they are cousins, and they keep drilling that fact in. They keep saying, she's my cousin, etc., or he's my cousin. And they don't really do anything with that until later episodes, which I like when they do stuff later in the series. But in the beginning, they're like, yeah, she's my cousin. Don't ship us, because traditionally audiences would do that, and they push for romance between Jake and Cassie, which is also subverting a lot of traditional archetypical patterns. Tobias is the wizard, and a romance is pushed between him and Rachel, which also subverts a handful of traditions. And Marco is a lancer, a really great lancer, combating, contrasting Jake's leader role, but they both have a really good connection with each other and lean on each other in ways that I usually don't see a lancer and a leader do. And Axe is, I forgot the term, but he's like the 6th person coming in, but he's like the Black Power Ranger or the Green Power Ranger? White Power Ranger? My boyfriend would know this. It's like the person coming in to the last, and they occupy a special space because he's also an Andalite, the aliens that are fighting against the Yeerks, so he holds a different sort of culture and knowledge that they use in the group to combat the Yeerks. The combination of all 6 of them is so good, and I really enjoy how it's all written. Ow! So yeah, I've talked enough about this show. Sorry. Because I listened to it as an audio book, like Magnus Archives, Malevolent, etc., there may be times where I slip up and say like show or episode when actually talking about the book. Sorry about that. That's just how I'm thinking, like, oh, this is episode 1, 2, etc. Book 1, book 2, whatever. Anyways, ranking 40 books in the Animorph series. These are our ranking categories. In the tradition of Casey Alonso, I've relabeled the categories to fit something within the series. In S tier, we have Delicious Cinnamon Buns, which is a reference to Axe, who once he morphs into a human, Andalites don't have mouths. And when he morphs into a human, he has a mouth. And not only is human speech really interesting for him, like when he's talking as a human, he'll be repeating consonants and repeating what he says because it feels interesting with his mouth. Andalites do not have tongues because they don't have a mouth. And so when Axe gets a mouth and gets a tongue with taste buds, oh my god, the explosion of sensation that he gets eating stuff. And there's some really good scenes of him just eating random garbage, random stuff. Like there's a scene, I forget in which book, that he eats both the burger and the paper plate and the napkin because he can, because it tastes good. I think he's also eaten like discarded cigarettes, erasers, I think there was one point. But he says his favorite flavor ever are cinnamon buns. And so that's why Delicious Cinnamon Buns are the S tier. This is books that are just delicious, amazing, stunning, beautiful, that will make Axe go crazy with the flavor and the taste. So that's our S tier. Our A tier is Morphed into a Dolphin. This is in reference, obviously, to when the Animorphs morph into a dolphin. And it was either between a dolphin and a dog, because both have the same result of them feeling overly happy and really overactive. And so it's not like as amazing as like Delicious Cinnamon Buns, but like as a dolphin, they're having a blast. I'm having a blast reading this book, Jesus. And Morphed into a Dolphin is our A tier. It's like really, really good. Not as amazing as Delicious Cinnamon Buns, but still really good. In the B tier, we have Chi Pacifism, which is a reference to a species of alien robots called the Chi, which, if I remember correctly, they were the ones that made dogs look the way that they do, way past human history. Early human history, the Chi came to Earth, and the Chi created. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. The Chi were created by, I forget what they're called, but they're an alien species that looks a lot like dogs. They were killed by a huge virus, I believe set off by the Yeerks, but I don't really remember about that. But the Chi survived because they were androids, shaped like dogs, and they came to Earth and made dogs in the vision of their creators. And that's why we have dogs that we do, because of the Chi. Anyways, the Chi are pacifists. They have, I forget if it's like a sworn oath or it's part of their programming, it's probably both, that they cannot raise hands against anybody, even their own enemies like the Yeerks, which causes some friction when the Animorphs interact with the Chi. But overall, the Chi are allies. Anyways, the Chi, pacifism, middle of the road. They're not doing anything. They're not choosing any side. They are fighting with the Animorphs, which makes them good. But this is middle of the road, like, it's fine. In C tier, we have reached the 2-hour time limit, which one of the limitations of the morphing power is that if you go past 2 hours in the morph, you are stuck in that morph and cannot morph back. And so to me, C tier, not really good. Oh, we've reached the 2-hour time limit, time to get out. Like, I'm done with this book. I don't need any more of this book. I'm past the 2-hour time limit for this book. Let's get the fuck out. And finally, in the D tier is Yeerk Scum. I would say that's self-explanatory. Basically, I hate Yerks. Yerks are horrible. The bad ones. There are some good ones. We'll touch on that. The Yerks, scum, horrible, bad. Endlights call Yerks scum as well. So that's just the really books that I could not care for at all that I would defeat in battle. My criteria for ranking these books is kind of similar to how I rank episodes in Magnus Archives or Magnus Protocol, where it is kind of vibes, kind of what it means for the story, what it means for the characters, what happens in the book in and of itself. Also, the performance of Daniel at times elevates what's happening. There's times where there are, like I said, special sound effects or the way he changes his voice to help know who's speaking when and where, especially because it's just audio. And so there's a combination of different factors that help me figure out how to rank these. Beyond also basic enjoyment of how much did I enjoy this book. But yes, so these are all the 5 categories, and let's get into it. I will be going through these in chronological order of the books, not in chronological order within the story, but the book publications and how they were released and stuff like that. Also by how they're listed on Goodreads, because that's where I've been keeping track. Friend me on Goodreads, okay? Starting off, we have book 1, The Invasion. I'm putting it in Morphed into a Dolphin, A tier. It's really good start to the entire series. This book, we're introduced to all the characters, we're introduced to the conflict, we're introduced to Alfangor, who gives them these powers. The kids, the 5 of them, are just by chance walking through a construction site when they witness Alfangor crash, and they go talk to him, and they found out, oh, it's an alien, it's an Analyte, and he's telling them about, like, your planet is being invaded by Yerks. Here is a power. I shouldn't be doing this, but here's a power for you to transform. And they're like, okay, now we have power now. What now? And so in the book, they're trying to figure out, what do we do? We learn that the Yerks have a limitation as well in their, it's not technology, but they're in evolution. The Yerks, we don't learn a little later that they started off with these aliens called Geds, which are like chimp-like, I believe, with like weird legs made for like the trees in the Yerk homeworld. But anyways, the Yerks, they evolved in throughout long history to be able to go into somebody's brain and take over. However, they must leave in 3 days. They go through this thing called Chondrona starvation because Yerks require these things called Chondrona rays to stay alive. Think of it like a charging thing in a way. And so the Yerks have to live inside a Yerk pool as well while they're getting these Chondrona rays. And so the Animorphs have to figure out, where is this huge Yerk pool where the Yerks are staying when they're resting. And they find out that their principal, Chapman, is also a Yerk controller. That's what the humans that are controlled by a Yerk is called, their controller, which I think is an inaccurate title for people who are taken over, because controller to me means that they're the people that are controlling, but they're controllers. Chapman is a human controller. I think also a volunteer. Like, there's also some humans that have agreed to being taken over by a Yerk, but a lot of the majority of the humans taken over are unwilling. So Jake, as an old lizard, uses his morph to follow Chapman to find out where the Yerk pool is. There's a really cool moment where Jake has the instinct to eat an insect. I forget what kind of insect, but he has to eat an insect, and he feels utter repulsion at having to eat an insect as a lizard. Really cool moment there. And he follows Chapman to the Yerk pool, which is underneath the school, or at least underneath the entire town. It's this huge underground chasm with like different entrances, and there they have the Yerk pool, the Chondrona rays, which is like this thing that hangs above that shoots the energy out that gives them life. They try to destroy it. They fail, which is also a really great subversion of these stories. Like usually this type of location is used as like an end game. Like this is where we take the last stand and destroy everything, but they fail in their mission and they run away. And unfortunately, Tobias, who was turned into a red-tailed hawk, stays past the 2-hour limit, and he becomes a Nothlid, which is a person that, or I guess in this culture, the Andalite, who stays past the 2 hours in the morph, and they cannot morph back. And so there's a lot of bad things that happen after the fact as well. And so this is just a really good start off for the series. I would say that I got immediately hooked by this specific book because it subverts so much of the archetypes that we see in these types of characters. It introduces the central plot and conflict really, really well, and sets us off with a really interesting status quo now of Tobias is a bird and cannot transform back into a human. Really, really good starting off, A tier for me. Next, we have book 2, The Visitor, which I will be putting in Chi Pacifism. It's fine. It's the cover we have Rachel turning into a cat, specifically Fluffer McKitty, which is the cat to her former best friend, who is the daughter of Chapman. And I honestly don't really remember that much in this book because I kind of found it boring. There was really cool moments where Rachel turned into this cat, and the descriptions of how lithe and agile she is as a cat and how dangerous she is as a cat, really cool. They're like trying to find out what Chapman is doing, and they use the cat as an in his house, and nothing comes out of it. Unfortunately for me, like a handful of times, the books end as they start and nothing changes, and that affects my enjoyment of the series. But overall, there is better books. But this book is not bad at all. It's just kind of boring for me. I think it's one of the most beautiful covers. Like, oh my god. But yeah, it's not like an amazing book as a continuation of from the last one. They're still learning how to deal with their morphs. I think we get more here in this episode of like when the children first morph into an animal, they have to contend with the instincts of the animal. And so different animals have different levels of internal instincts. Like for a cat, it's very predatory. For Rachel to have to deal with the cat instincts when she first transforms into it is a lot for her. Some other morphs they have to deal with as well, like the instinct of the animal. Most of the time it's really good. Most of the time it's terrifying. But yeah, this book, I honestly don't have much to say about it. The conflict of like Rachel trying to befriend once more her ex-best friend, because her friend knows instinctually that something changed for her father and her mother. Both of them are controllers. I believe Chapman was voluntary, but the wife is not. And so she knows that something changed. She doesn't know that they've been controlled by an alien, but she feels this sort of frustration because she knows that her parents are different. And nothing comes out of that. Rachel sort of like reaches out, but she never comes back again. At least like one time or 2 times she comes back. But overall, it's more of a setup book as well. So middle of the road. Chi Pacifism. Next, we have book 3, The Encounter, which I will be putting in Chi Pacifism. This book is in the point of view of Tobias, as he is an Nothlid, a red-tailed hawk, dealing with him not being able to transform back into a human. We learn that he was orphaned, quote-unquote. His mother disappeared. His father was never in the picture, which we'll get to that. But he had no parents, and he was shuttled back and forth between his uncle and aunt, who both of them didn't want to deal with him. And so when he disappears, the kids make it so that the aunt thinks that he's staying with the uncle, and the uncle thinks he's staying with the aunt, but they don't talk to each other. So there's this tenuous limbo state of where Tobias is. In reality, he's a bird. And in this book, I believe that the Yeerks are trying to do some environmental damage and specifically are sucking up water from a lake. The mission is actually a little bit interesting because a lot of the action is relegated to the other Animorphs who transform into wolves and like fish and stuff like that, trying to deal with this Yeerk ship that is sucking up water. And Tobias is relegated to be a lookout, a bird. But it's really cool that he gets this moment to show off when, as fishes, the other Animorphs are taken up by the Yeerk ship and they're trapped, and he uses his quick thinking and flying skills to outmaneuver the ship and get it to, I believe, crash in with other ships to let the fishes and the other Animorphs free. So there's a really cool moment of him working on his own. But like I said with the last book, nothing really comes out of this. There's also a moment that I didn't quite like. That was him as a bird looking at another red-tailed hawk who is a female and being like, should I? Or should I not? I shan't say. And I'm like, you're 13 or 14. Their ages are never stated. But like, you're super young. So like, calm down. And yeah, there's not much that happens in this book that affects anything prior, but it's a really cool moment of like an individual, because the mission, usually we see these missions in the point of view of the people enacting them, but it's Tobias seeing his friends being captured and stuff, so it's him watching from the outskirts and then affecting the ship. That was really cool. But overall, cheap pacifism for me. Book 4, The Message, is going in morphed into a dolphin. This is when they first morph into dolphins. And it is in the point of view of Cassie, who I believe it's through dreams and like other moments that she's morphed, that she hears a voice calling out to her from the distance that's asking for help. And the Animorphs think that it is a trap, and they try to figure out what it is. I think this is also when they morph into whales too. There's a moment where they morph into a whale, I believe, or Cassie does, and it's so cool because the whales, I might be thinking about a different moment, because they're in like the west coast of the United States, so they're close to a beach. Some sources say they are in California. No exact mention of that in any of the books, but whatever. I believe they turn into a whale at some point to try to figure out, hey, is this voice real or not? And they find out that deep in the ocean is like a pod, like a ship, that is like a snow globe with like grass and trees in it, and there is an Andalite, Aximili Isgareth Istil. And he says he's Alfangor's brother, who was part of the battle above the earth that basically destroyed an Andalite fleet, and he had to crash down. Elfangor specifically released the pod ship to let Axe have a chance of survival on Earth. I mean, the big thing here is that we get Axe now, which is really cool. Axe is an amazing character because, like I said, with the mouth thing and the voice and the taste thing, really good. But also we get another aspect of a different culture, an alien culture. Also, an alien culture looking at a human culture and seeing how weird we are, which is also really cool. And we'll see moments later of Axe dealing with the human cultures and human mores and stuff like that. I forgot to mention Cassie's parents run a wildlife clinic, and her mother works at a like huge wildlife sanctuary. Her father is a vet with a barn, and they take care of animals, exotic animals more than anything, and they're right next to a forest. And so Cassie, using the connections of her parents, is able to get animals for them to morph into. Like in the first book, they go into this wildlife sanctuary so they can get different types of morphs, and they get the signature battle morphs, which is Jake's is a Siberian tiger, Marco's is a gorilla, Rachel oscillates between a bear and an elephant, but it's mostly bear, Tobias red-tailed hawk, and Cassie a wolf. So we get more of Cassie in this one because it's in her POV. And it's a really good book because we now have an advancement in the plot, an advancement of the story. We have a 6th Animorph. I didn't notice this. I saw it in the Animorph wiki, but it mentioned that in a lot of the synopses of the books, it's stated that it's the 5 Animorphs and Axe, stating that Axe is not an Animorph. He's simply an ally. However, in the books themselves, he is described as the 6th Animorph, which contradicts the synopses. That's just a quirk of language. Anyways, yeah, so we get Axe now. Axe uses this thing. I literally just looked it up. This was when I still had physical books, but it was not mentioned here. It's mentioned in a later book, the term of Frollis maneuver, where in this time, he doesn't explain that it's the Frollis maneuver, but Axe, as an Andalite, already has the morphing technology, acquires the morph of Cassie, Jake, Rachel, and Marco, not Tobias, because Tobias is the bird. And he uses the Frollis maneuver to combine them and create a morph of himself, which is a uniquely distinct human being, male, of Axe. And he's described multiple times in different books as like pretty, as very pretty, because it's a mixture of 2 girls, 2 boys, androgynous, mixed race, and kind of endearing because he looks like he has like a deer in headlights type vibe at times. And so, yeah, overall, this book pretty good, especially because we get the whales. I hope this is where the whales come in, because the whales were so cool, because the whales have this like internal language with the dolphins when they transform into the dolphins, and they're like speaking to the dolphins in a way, the Animorphs as dolphins, in a way that is not language like a human language, but is it advanced language? It's hard to explain, but it's so cool. They have a level of intelligence that I've never seen explored in any sort of media, and it is beautiful. Axe comes in, really good book. Here, it's going in morphed into a dolphin. Next, we have book 5, The Predator, which we'll be putting in morphed into a dolphin. A tier, really good episode. It is Marco's POV throughout the first 4 books. Marco has been hesitant about being an Animorph. Like, he does not want to go on these missions. He does not want to do anything. He's afraid for his life. He sees that all of the other Animorphs have family that they can turn to, or at least Cassie, Jake, and Rachel do. But his father is not in the best of straits because Marco's parents, Marco's mother, disappeared and is presumed dead. And so his father, having lost his mother pretty recently, I believe within the last 2 or 3 years, is despondent, depressed, and disconnected from reality. And so Marco is basically taking care of his father because his father has disconnected from the world. Marco is hesitant about being an Animorph because if he dies in any of these missions, his father is left fully alone, and that might be really, really bad for him. And so Marco is hesitant about that and doesn't want to do any of the Animorph stuff. Granted, mind you, Marco was the one who coined the term Animorphs. So I have it in my notes here. There is a moment where I forget exactly what they're doing, but they have to transform into ants. And that is terrifying because the instincts of the ants are both non-existent and fully controlled by a hive mind. And so they have a lot of trauma after the fact of becoming an ant, because I believe they're going into Chapman's house. And they know that they can't use Cassie's or Rachel's cat morph anymore. So let's do another thing. Let's do an ant that can burrow, and then we can get information using that. But they find out that the ants are heavily controlled by the hive mind, and they don't like that. And it's terrifying. It's mentioned in the book that like if ants were like human sized, there would always be like wars. I remember reading a book, Mort, parentheses E, which is about how ants grew intelligent enough to release a gas that made other animal species sentient and caused a war between humans and animals, and humans lost, and the ants are now the leaders. Ants are incredibly antagonistic towards each other, and they're always having some form of war between ant colonies, and so we get this depicted here as well. Really great moment. I don't remember exactly why they became ants beyond just like they're going through some place, they're tunneling. Anyways, the big thing in this book, beyond just the ant thing, which I remembered vividly because it was terrifying, is that Marco is hesitant about becoming an Animorph because he thinks his mother's dead and his father is depressed because of that. The Animorphs get kidnapped, captured in some way, I forget exactly, and it finds out that the main antagonist, oh my god, I haven't even talked about Visitor 3. Oh, I'm so sorry. Visitor 3 is the main antagonist of the series. Visitor 3 is the person who kills Elfangor near the first book, and Visitor 3 is the person that they're combating against through the majority of the story. Visitor 3 specifically is a Yeerk. Visor is the name of the rank, and the number is how high they are. Visitor 3 is an Andalite, or a Yeerk taking over an Andalite. Specifically, the only Yeerk to have ever taken over an Andalite. And because they're in a war, he is called the Abomination by a lot of Andalites. So Visitor 3 in some way captures the Animorphs because he believes that they're all Andalite bandits that escaped from the ship fight that Elfangor was part of. He thinks that it's a bunch of Andalites on Earth doing guerrilla warfare, and so he captures them in Morph and is taking them somewhere, put them in jail, and is making them wait out the 2-hour limit. And they're afraid that if he finds out that they're humans, that the Yeerk invasion force will attack their families. And so there's this level of anonymity that they have to preserve, sort of like superheroes, Superman, Spider-Man, etc. And they find out that Visor 1 is coming to do something. I forget exactly what. And Visor 3 and Visor 1, the way that Visor 3 and the other Yeerks talk about their relationship is very antagonistic. I forget if it's stated here, but Visor 1 is the Yeerk that started the invasion on Earth, but Visor 3 has advanced the invasion in of itself. And so there's conflict between them because Visor 1 is like, this is my job, but you've taken over it, and Visitor 3 is like, I've done much more. It's very catty. It's a really cool antagonistic relationship here. When they're captured, they find out that Visitor 1 is a human, a woman, specifically Marco's mother. I know, right? Yeah. It's such a cool reveal that because a lot of the past few episodes, few books, has been leading to Marco doesn't want to be here because his mother's dead, his father's despondent. His mother's not dead. She's a Yeerk. And Visor 1. And also, she is so cool. We find out her name is Idris, Visor 1. The Yeerks have individual names, but they also have ranks. I forget Visor 3's. Visor 1's is Idris. She becomes a secondary antagonist later in the series. I love Idris, Visor 1. Whatever. Anyways, she hates Visor 3. Visor 3 hates her. And she sees that the Animorphs are captured. And she makes her Yeerk forces attack Visor 3's forces secretly and secretly releases the Animorphs from their captivity so that it looks bad on him, and she gets to, I forget exactly what she wants to do, but she's trying to make him look bad. She's trying to make Visor 3 look bad. So she releases the Animorphs. And there's a really good moment. They're like, we can't trust her. And only Jake knows, besides Marco, that that's his mother. I think either the other Animorphs don't recognize her or they don't see her at all, but Jake and Marco do. And she releases them so that it looks bad on Visor 3. And she's like, I'm only doing this because it's like that one scene in Star Wars that's like, I don't care if you win. I don't care if the rebels win. I care if Kylo loses. That's it. And it's a really great moment because after that, after they are free, after they return back to Earth, free from their capture, Marco's like, I'm all in. My mother is a Yeerk. And any way that I can free her means that I have to be in this fight. And so from then on, Marco has no more qualms about being an Animorph, which was one of the things I'll say was kind of annoying, that like he was always saying, I don't want to be an Animorph, but now he sees his mother is part of the conflict. He has to be in there too, which is a really great progression of his character. And I adore this moment. Overall, the things around it happening, don't really remember. Don't know why they're ants. But yeah, because of how much this book comments on past and now future things, changes future things, it's a really good book. It's a really good, it's A tier for me. He's also a gorilla. This is where he uses his gorilla at the very beginning. Some kids are bullying this older man, and he goes up to the kids, transform as a gorilla, and like fights them. And then the old man is like, "Oh, monster!" and shoots him with a gun. And Marco's like, "Come on!" Also, to that point, really also part of the technology, when they morph into and out, it's reconstituting DNA. And so if, say, for example, as a human, they break their leg, they transform into a animal, whatever animal, they become that animal, and they transform back into a human, their leg is fine. Or if they're in a morph, like a bird morph, and their wing breaks, they transform back into a human, and they transform back into a bird, bird is healed. That's like both a limitation and an advantage of the morphing technology. Really cool, really cool. What is this, world building? Technology, yeah. Book 6, The Capture. Now I will have to say, I didn't really remember this one really well when I was doing these rankings, because it is so long ago. It is going in Delicious Cinnamon Months, because it is Jake's POV. The Animorphs are doing some sort of mission. I believe he turns into a fly. Yeah, because the cover is a fly. He turns into a fly, and they go into like this hospital that is actually a mission by the Yeerks to take over. I believe it's like a high-ranking official in the United States government who gets hit by a car. I think this is this episode. He gets hit by a car, and he's squirreled away by Secret Service to this hospital, and the plan by the Yeerks is to take him over using a Yeerk, make him a controller. And so they try to stop that. They succeed in killing the Yeerk pool inside the hospital, so that the man doesn't get taken over by the Yeerks. However, at the very last moment, Jake falls into the Yeerk pool and gets a Yeerk into his brain. And so after that, he becomes a controller. And that is the number one worst scenario, because not only does now the Yeerk have full access to his memories, the Yeerk, can go to the Yeerk leadership and be like, hey, there are 4 other humans and 1 Analyte that know how to morph. We take them as a controller and use them to advance the invasion. Really bad stuff, right? And so the Yeerk is trying to act like Jake, and the other Animorphs see that Jake fell into the pool, and now he's acting slightly off, and so they managed to keep him in a cabin in the woods for 3 days to starve out the Yeerk and make sure that it dies. And it's a really prolonged, I wouldn't say torture sequence, but it's a prolonged angst and anguish of Jake and the Yeerk. I forget its name, but specifically the Yeerk is also the Yeerk that used to be, because Jake's brother, Tom, is a controller as well. That was also established in the first book. That's also a big thing happening, is that Jake's brother is a controller as well. And so that Yeerk used to be controlling Tom, and through the 3 days, the Yeerk inside Jake uses Jake's morphing powers to try to escape, but the Animorphs, the other Animorph kids, know exactly what he can do, exactly what the limitations of these animals are, and they work in different ways to keep him contained. And it's so smart, it's so good, because you never know who has the upper hand, because it flips back and forth between the Animorphs are in power, the Yeerk, it has more power, and it keeps flipping back and forth, and we don't know who has the most power here. And it's such a really, really intense book, trying to get this Yeerk out of Jake's brain. And at the end, it dies painfully from congenital starvation, which is painful. And it was so good reading how the Animorphs were like, you know, if it was actually Jake would agree to the 3 days of starvation just to make sure that everything's fine. And the Yeerk is like, come on, Cassie, you love me. You need to like let me free. And Cassie's like, Jake would never do this. Your Yeerk is so good. It's so good. And yeah, that's why this is an S tier, delicious cinnamon buns. Book 7, The Stranger, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin. Here we have in Rachel's POV, they go to the Yeerk pool underneath the school, and I forget exactly what they're trying to do, but there's a moment where they turn into, I believe, cockroaches. They can turn into cockroaches too, which is disgusting. And they encounter, they're beyond just human controllers as well. There are taxon controllers, which are these huge alien slug-like monsters that have an insatiable hunger, and Hork-Bajir, which are these reptilian, almost velociraptor type aliens with sharp blades on their wrists, ankles, and tails. And they are all controllers as well. And there's a moment where a taxon sees the kids as little insects, and it goes to eat them, and then everything freezes. They're like, what is happening? From the center of the chasm, this thing appears, and it is called an Elemist. And it is, Axe knows that it is a Andalite childhood myth of this alien species that has like uber crazy control over different things. I'm not fully sure exactly what the Elemist is. I hate that bitch. He comes down and he tells them, hey, I see that the Yeerks are having an invasion and they will destroy the Earth. I'm giving you 5 and Axe, you 6, the chance to be the only humans that I take to safety, while the other humans here in planet on Earth are taken over by Yeerks. So I can preserve your species. And they say, the fuck? No? Well, actually, there is a lot of philosophical conversation between all of the Animorphs whether they should take this offer or not. At some point, it's split 50-50. And there's a point where the Elemist shows the Animorphs the future of Earth, of humanity, when the Yeerks win. And it's stated that this is a certainty, quote unquote. And the Elemist has this power, but it constantly says that I do not interfere with the affairs of species. And the Animorphs are like, so what the hell are you doing here, interfering with us? Whatever. And they go into the future, and Rachel sees an older version of herself as a controller and have some sort of conversation. And it basically boils down to like, your choices affect nothing. And this will happen regardless of whether you keep fighting or not. And so just give up. And Rachel's like, I cannot do that. I cannot give up. That's stupid. And we go back to the present, and they're like, why did the Elemist show us this? And they start thinking about things that the Elemist told them. And in reality, the Elemist is playing like 4D chess and is actually secretly trying to send messages to them through the double meanings of what he says. And they find out that he's actually trying to help them within the limitations of his species rule of not to interfere with any other species stuff. And they figure out that he was trying to tell them where the new Chondrona ray is positioned, which is like on this big tower. And they go and destroy the Chondrona ray thing. And so this, for me, the A-tierness is simply just the introduction of the Elemist, who becomes this sort of like, not trickster character specifically, but this like other species alien that is doing stuff. Really weird stuff. And I hate him. I hate him so much. I despise how, because he keeps saying he doesn't want to interfere, but he still does. So like, the fuck are you talking about? Whatever. The Elemist becomes a really important character. Secondary, tertiary ally. Barely allied to the characters. And so this episode is where he gets introduced. And, there's a future moment that's also really cool. And yeah, it's a really good episode here because of all of that. Book 7.5, The Andalite's Gift. Now, beyond just the normal progression of the books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., all the way to 54, there are also, I believe, 2 spin-off series, or slightly longer books, and expand a little bit more on the world, the lore, the world building, the characters, etc. All of the mainline books are within one point of view, with some exceptions, but the Megamorphs series is, I believe, 4 or 5 books. And within the 40 books, I'm only doing 1, 2, and 3 because those are the only ones that I've been able to listen to. And this is Megamorph number 1. The other series is the Animorph Chronicles, which we'll touch on those when we get to those. Yeah, this is Megamorphs 1, which is the point of view of all 5 characters, all 6 characters. I'm sorry, Axe. I'm so sorry, Axe. All 6 characters. It is going in cheap pacifism. I think this is my least favorite of the Megamorphs books, but it's still a really good book in and of itself as well. So it's in different point of views of the characters, and they're in some sort of like pool party with like some school friends, and Marco and I think Tobias and Axe were not invited. Obviously, Tobias and Axe were not invited. Marco was not invited to this pool party, but Jake was. So was Rachel, and it's some girls' pool party. And Marco and Tobias and Axe terrorize the party by turning into rats. And they're like, Rachel's like, "Hey, stop messing around." Rachel and Marco have a really good relationship, very rivals. This is the type of relationship I would see within like a leader and a lancer, of like quippy fighting against each other, but it's Rachel and Marco instead of the leader Jake. And then all of a sudden a like dust storm attacks, and the rest of the Animorphs minus Rachel get out, but Rachel gets knocked out, and like she runs away, gets knocked out, loses her memory briefly, and so there's a subplot of Rachel with an amnesia. The other Animorphs are trying to find her while also dealing with this dust storm, which is actually this alien monster dust storm thing that is attacking them. They find out that it was sent by Visitor 3 as this like swarm of sand-like things that pursue the energy source from morphing. So they're trying to deal with that while also trying to find Rachel, who's dealing with her amnesia. There's a moment where Rachel stumbles upon like this woman living in the woods in like I think this cave or like a cabin. I forget exactly which. And the woman traps Rachel because the woman is, I wouldn't say she's going insane or crazy, but she's traumatized because she used to be a controller and is no longer a controller. She knows about Yerks. She talks about Yerks. She is paranoid. And Rachel, who has amnesia at this time, doesn't know what she's talking about, thinks that she's going crazy, which obviously to any normal person would sound like she's going crazy. She escapes, run away. Woman never comes back. That plot point, so interesting. Never comes back. At least not within the 35 mainline books or any of the Megamorphs or Animorph Chronicles. Never comes back. And I think that is wasted. I think that was a really cool moment, and that never comes up again. But anyways, once the Animorphs are reunited, they're trying to deal with this alien that follows them, pursues them, and I really like the solution that they come to, which they know this alien is mostly sand, basically. Sand robots or something like that, mini swarm of sand. And so they know that it's attracted by the energy released when there is a morph. So what Cassie plans to do, what I really like this solution, is that she turns into like a bird and uses that transformation to lure the sand monster following her, because it can fly, obviously. So she's a bird. She flies up above the ocean, and they had found out before that the sand monsters want to take the Animorphs and take them to Visitor 3, and so it does not want to kill them specifically. It wants to capture them, and so it wants to lift them up. And at one point, Rachel was an elephant, and it had trouble lifting her up. And so they have this idea. So Cassie goes into the air as a bird, I believe. Or no, I think she's like an insect and Tobias takes her up, or whatever. A bird goes up, using the morphing energy to lure it up to follow them. She turns back into human, and that's a morphing energy, and the dust storm attacks her and grabs her. She transforms into a whale, twice, 3 times the size of this storm, and uses the added weight of the fall and the whale to fall into the ocean. And because the monster, the alien monster, is made of sand, dissolves the monster and kills it. And I think that's a really cool solution to this problem. But overall, it was a fine book. The Rachel Amnesia storyline felt like filler. Like I said, that one woman who knows that she was controlled by Yerk, nothing comes out of that. And the monster is really cool. The alien's really cool, and like I said, the way that they solve the problem is cool. But overall, it's fine. It's middle of the road for me. Book 8, The Alien, is going in morphed into a dolphin. This is Axe's first time as a POV character, and this is a really interesting because at the beginning of each chapter for the former books, it was just chapter whatever, chapter 1, 2, 3, and then straight into the text. But here we had Axe having like diary entries into his study of human culture, and he's acting almost like an anthropologist. I think there's a moment where he's like, I'm kind of doing anthropology. It's really good insights as to how Andalites would perceive humans. He keeps talking about how primitive humans are while also being very different. Like there's a moment that I always return to that he's like, they created technology backwards, where they created the most efficient and fast way to transport information, which is print, and then created the slowest way to transport information, which is the internet. But they see the internet as more advanced than the books. But us Andalites, these books are a revelation because you get information instantly, and they're always there, and you have to wait like 2-3 seconds for something to load on the internet. Really cool moments here. And we see Axe dealing with his want to avenge his brother's death. He knows that Alfangor was killed by Visor 3, so he needs to kill Visor 3 to honor his brother as a warrior. We get really cool glimpses of Andalite culture, prayers that they do at the beginning of the day, prayers they do before they go into war, and there's a moment where Axe has to lie to the Animorphs and say, I'm not going to do anything, but it is simply just so he can do it on his own, because he knows that he will not survive an assassination attempt on Visor 3. And he transforms into a snake, and we learn that because they don't have mouths, the way that Andalites eat is by running around grass and basically grazing on the grass like a cow or like a horse, but using the hooves of their feet to eat. It's a really cool revelation close to the end of the book, where the kids are like, so how do you eat? And it's, oh, we run through the grass and we eat the grass. That's a really cool biology creation of these aliens. I would say, so yeah, this is an A level for me. However, there is a moment that I didn't quite like / understand, but in the assassination attempt that Axe takes on his own, because he has to honor the death of his brother, to kill Visor 3, he turns into a venomous snake, a cobra, and he sneaks up to, because he knows that Visor 3 would be vulnerable when he's grazing, sneaks up to Visor 3 in the field where Visor 3 eats, bites him, and Visor 3 escapes, the slug escapes, and the Andalite that was in, because whenever the Yeerks can take control of somebody, the person that they're controlling is still there. That's also part of the horror of this entire series, that the person is still there. We learn that the Andalite is Prince Oberon, who is a infamous Andalite prince. We will learn more about him later. And Oberon begs Axe to kill him, but Axe can't do that. And so he has to leave, because all of a sudden other Hork-Bajir, Taxon, and human controllers attack. The other Animorphs find out that Axe was trying to do this. They come and save him, and they manage to escape. But I thought he should have killed Oberon, so that Visitor 3 would have to find a different host. But that would be a little too much change in the plot, I think. But that would have been really cool. You know, an honor killing, or like Oberon is suffering. Why didn't he kill him? It is what it is. There's also a moment earlier before that where Axe is able to contact other Andalites, and we learn about Ciro's promise. Ciro is the name of an Andalite that gave Yerks the technology to be able to traverse the galaxy. And that led to the Yerk-Andalite War. And so the Andalites created this law that says that the Andalites cannot give any species any technology. And technically, Alfangor broke that law to give the kids the morphing powers. And so Axe contacts a general, and they sort of twist, they're talking to each other, and they sort of twist this information. And so the general's like, you gave this technology to these humans, you broke the law, not your brother, because if your brother did that, that would be defacing a really popular and worshipped prince, Alfangor. And Axe is like, yes, I did it. Well, you broke the law, but as general, I absolve you of your crimes. This is a weird, crazy politics happening. Amazing, amazing politics too. And there's also a moment, I swear, I need to look at it again, but I swear someone says to Axe, I think he gets to talk to his father and mother too as well, which is he misses his family. The Andalites won't be able to reach them fast enough, so they have to wait. But eventually the Andalites will come, and until then, they will fight. But either way, there's a moment, I think, that one of the Andalites tells him that the Andalite homeworld has already been infiltrated. That hasn't come back yet. But I remember that. And that might happen later in the series. But a lot of information happening in this one book. And I hope I conveyed how good this book is. So yeah, it's an A tier for me. Axe is a really cool character, really cool descriptions throughout. Book 9, The Secret, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin. Also a really good book. The subplot, quote unquote, is actually the like big important thing happening, and then the main plot is the traditional subplot here. Since we learned from last book that Andalites feed by grazing on grass, Visitor 3 thinks that the Animorphs are actually just Andalite bandits, and he surmises that the only way they can eat is not in his meadow, somewhere else. And so he plans to go send people, Yerks, to raise the land, to do deforestation and destroy the land. And they combat against that. But that is really the subplot. It gets solved pretty quickly, and they stop the deforestation and everything pretty quickly. They turn into wolves here, which is really cool. The main plot is actually Cassie dealing with this family of skunks that, in the conflict with the Yerks, the mother skunk is killed, and she wants to take care of the baby skunks. And so closer to the end of the book actually is when this all happens, and she's taking care of the skunks. And it's a really nice, small, intimate moment of her trying to help these baby skunks, morphing into a skunk. The other Animorphs also morph into skunks as well to help take care of the baby skunks. And it's a really nice moment. Also, similar to the ants, I don't remember why, but they turn into termites, and it's even a worse experience than the ants. The termites are even worse of, like, hive mind, and Cassie has to fight against a termite hive mind, and she kills the termite queen so that they can escape and turn back into humans, because or otherwise they would not have been able to do that. And that's also equally, even more terrifying than the ants prior. And so I remember that moment as well specifically, but also that the deforestation subplot that gets solved pretty quickly, and then the skunks, really cute moment there. So as a whole, pretty good episode, pretty good book. Book 10, The Android, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin, which is really good sequence of books here. We have Marco, POV, who finds out that one of his childhood friends, Eric, comes into town, and there's something off about him. And I think they turn into like a dog, and they can smell that he's not human specifically, or that he's different, but not a Yeerk. So they're not sure exactly what he is. So they start trying to figure out what Eric is. They go to a meeting of the sharing. The sharing is a Yeerk operation run by a collective of controllers, including Jake's brother Tom, that serve as like sort of like a, what is it, big brother big sister group, or like YMCA type thing, Christian youth group, but it's actually a front for Yeerks to take controllers, to take humans to become controllers, and they constantly try to work against the sharing. There's a moment where the sharing is doing some sort of like lake festivity in like the woods. Marco turns into a wolf spider to try to find out what's happening with Eric, because Eric is there. This is when we find out that Eric is actually a Chi. Here's a Chi. This is when the Chi come in, when we learn about the history of the Chi, when we learn about the dog imagery of the Chi and their pacifism. And this is when the Chi begin becoming part of the story, allies with the Animorphs. They have to work together to find something. The actual plot in and of itself is not that exciting, but the Chi storyline, the Chi history is really cool. There's a really cool moment where Marco turns into the wolf spider in the cover, gets eaten by a bird, demorphs inside the bird, and falls to the ground covered in bird guts. And then Eric is like, "Hey, you good?" Really good moment there. And so for me, this book is really important and really good because of Chi and Eric, and they're specifically like dog robots that have holograms, and there's a lot of reoccurring moments of like force fields that make, so like the robot has like robot arm, maybe thin, and then you can feel like it feels like human skin if you touch it, because it's the force field, and then like illusions and like holograms and stuff like that. The actual mission, I don't really quite remember. I think I do remember that they are trying to get something to allow for Cheese to override their pacifism, and it backfires on them slightly. And in the end, Eric becomes free of his pacifism, kills a bunch of controllers, and he's like, "I don't like this," undoes that, and he's like, "I'm so sorry, I cannot fight. This is horrible." And the other Animorphs was like, "Yeah, that was terrifying. Don't do that again." And honestly, when I was listening to this book, the last part, I was kind of busy, so I wasn't fully paying attention. But the Chi are important. So A tier for me. Book 11, The Forgotten, is going and reach the 2-hour time limit. I don't really enjoy this book that much. It is in the point of view of Jake. They go through a mission where they find that a Yeerk ship had crashed into this superstore or whatever. There's a moment with lobsters. They turn into lobsters. That's kind of fun. But they take the ship, and they're being chased by Visor 3 and other Yeerks and other ships, and they shoot at each other, and when the blasts meet each other, it creates a Sario rift, and they go back in time. This is not the only time they go back in time. They do this multiple times. Okay? This is the first time that they go back in time. Specifically, they go back in time to pre-civilization in the Amazon. And all the Yeerks are there too. And they have to also deal with jungle stuff while also dealing with the elements, animals, and the Yeerks. And I would say the vibes of the book are really good. It's terrifying. They're in the jungle. They don't know what's happening. They're trying to learn on the fly what's happening. They acquire morphs of animals in the jungle. However, the solution is cool, but not what I like, because they're trying to figure out, well, if we take our ship that we stole and fix it, the other ship that the Yeerks have can recreate the Sario Rip and hopefully get back to the real time. That does not work. They cannot revive the ship that they crashed. Visor 3 transforms, a really cool moments of Visor 3 turning into aliens that we have no idea. The Animorphs don't have any idea what he can turn into, because he's an andalite with the morphing technology. So that's a level of power that that Visor 3 has. That's really cool. And they're fighting against Visor 3. Their plan failed. They don't know what to do. And there's a moment where they're practically beaten. They had found allies prior with like indigenous people who believe them to be like gods, I believe. And they join with them to fight the Yerks, which they see as invaders. And Jake gets killed and gets right back to where they were prior. And it turns out that because he had died, he had returned back to the time. And I'm still confused about that. And I didn't quite like that, nor did I understand it. It's a Sario Rip thing. And like he talks to Axe, and Axe is like, yeah, that seems to be like, this is what happened, is that you died and you were brought back to the world, normal, and nothing changes. Everything that you remember happened, but actually didn't. Okay. I didn't quite, because it was confusing. It's not that really good for me. Book 12, The Reaction, is going in delicious, delicious cinnamon ones. There's a really cool moment. I guess it is a premonition of Harambe, because Rachel is at the zoo and a kid falls into the crocodile paddock. A part of the morphing technology is that when they are, quote unquote, acquiring an animal or any species, when they are acquiring it, the specific animal that they're taking the DNA from becomes pacified and gets like in a trance and calms down. And so Rachel wants to do that. She jumps into the crocodile paddock, and she is acquiring the crocodile to calm it down, just so that there's enough time for people to come in and rescue the kid. After that, Rachel's having some issues with her morphing. There's a moment where she's sleeping in her room, and she lives in a house with her mom and her two sisters. She has a divorced dad that she contacts a handful of times. It's not important. And she's sleeping and she's dealing with this stress, and then she all of a sudden, like almost like a sneeze, morphs into an elephant and crashes through the second floor. Thankfully, no one was underneath her, but they were like, hey, what the fuck happened? And her father's there too. Rachel had saved the kid. She got a little locally famous. And then she turns into an elephant, crashes through the middle of her house, gets a little bit more locally famous. And they're like, want to interview her. And they're like, hey, you survived this. How do you feel? Because she's like a local famous person now. That's why they're in the TV station. She, turns out, is actually allergic to crocodiles. And because she acquired the morph of crocodile, she has this weird allergy going through with her technology, which is why she's having troubles with this morphing. There's a really cool moment where she goes into the bathroom at this TV station with Cassie, because Cassie knows that, hey, something's wrong here. And very substance-like, a crocodile bursts out of her back, and she turns into a bear, and the crocodile is like, what the fuck is happening? And they fight. Cassie's a squirrel. And it's just a mess of things. Marco's a llama. It's crazy. It's craziness happening here. She's allergic to a crocodile. How would anyone find that out except for an Animorph becoming a crocodile? And because of that reaction, a crocodile bursts out of her back. Hello? Like, come on. And yes, it's a really fun episode, really fun book. In and of itself, it doesn't really do anything, but really, really cool, really fun. And I enjoyed myself listening to it, because I was like, the general mystery of like, why is Rachel going through this? What's happening with her? The accidental elephant transformation and other moments in between, like what's happening with her? Crazy, crazy moments. And like I said, it doesn't really affect anything of the overall plot. Cassie becomes a squirrel. Cassie becomes Rachel, transforms into Rachel for the interview because Rachel's dealing with her allergy. Oh, just craziness. And I adore this book, because of that. Book 12.5, The Andalite Chronicles. Now, when I was listening through Daniel's podcast, I decided to listen through the main stories. The Megamorphs were definitely like part of the main characters, so I was like, yeah, I'll listen to those. When I got to Andalite Chronicles, it's like it doesn't deal with any of the main characters and any of the 6 characters, so I'm just gonna skip it. So I did, and I kept going, and then I got to the very like moment where I'm caught up with Daniel, and so I'm like, okay, I have nothing else to do while I wait. Let me just go back to listen to the books that I skipped, which was Andalite Chronicles and Hork-Bajir Chronicles. Reader, these books are fucking amazing. Andalite Chronicles is going straight to Delicious Cinnamon Buns. It is dealing with Alfangor's youth as a Aerith, I believe. It is a cadet type deal as an Andalite. He's not a prince yet. It's a really long book as well. Like, the normal books are about 5.5 hours long. Once the full like reading of it, this book was 7.5 hours long, and that's really long for like one of these books. And it is fucking amazing. It's Alfangor learning about the time matrix, which we also learn about. I forget what they're called. They're like these aliens that have 2 lifespans. The one of which is an insectoid that becomes a cocoon that becomes one of those gray aliens, like Area 51 type green aliens, the gray green aliens. Those really cool world building there. That's why we think that Martians or aliens look like the gray people, because this is that alien in the series. The time matrix is a thing that has not been mentioned before at all, and is some sort of weapon that they have to deal with. Now, mind you, I listened to the second to last book before I finished the 40 books, right? So I already knew what the time matrix was, but this is the first time the time matrix is mentioned. And we have Alfangor following the orders of Prince Oberon, who is a disgraced prince because he did something. We'll get to that in a bit. And they go to the Taxon homeworld and try to find the time matrix. There's also 2 humans that those first aliens, the gray aliens, had kidnapped, Lauren and Chapman. And it's this whole like melodramatic action heist type story with Alfangor and Lauren, who is a human. His friend, I forget his friend's name, but he becomes a Taxon Nothlid, and he's dealing with so much stuff. It is an amazing story. Amazing writing. So fucking good. And turns out he falls in love with Lauren. He leaves the war, moves to Earth to live with Lauren, becomes a human, uses that method that I talked about before that I forgot the name of now, of combining different DNAs of humans into one specific human to become a man, falls in love with Lauren, and then all of a sudden the Elemist appears as a human, and he's like, this is not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be fighting with the Andalites. And so the Elemist takes Alfangor from his human life gives him back the power to morph, so he can turn back into an Andalite. He fights against Visor 3 in the past on the Taxon world. This is when Visor 3 takes over Prince Oberon and becomes, well, at that time he was like unranked, and then he becomes Visor 33. Hi, Editing David here. So I have no idea why I keep saying, well, I have an idea. When I'm talking about Oberon, I'm talking about Oleron, Semitor Karas. I think Oberon is the name of Alfangor's friend, because his friend is not called Oberon, it's called Arbron. I had to look this up because I'm listening to the stories, so it's hard to understand exactly 100% what the names are, especially if they're alien names. But yeah, so whenever I say, because Alaron appears further in the stories, further in the books, whenever he does appear, I will call him Oberon accidentally, but I mean Alaron. Alaron Scimitar Karas is who I'm talking about. I'm so sorry about that. Now back to me rambling. Elmas takes him back to fight in the war, and Prince Alfangor is now in the war with the Andalites and the Yeerks, and he does this amazing maneuver with the ship to gain high notoriety, becomes part of the important war, continues going through the war, reaches to the very end, because at the beginning of the book, this is like a snapshot, like as he's dying, being killed by Visor 3 at the beginning of the book 1, he's like, this is my story, I'm recording it into like this alien technology. It's just the framing device. And we reach all the way to him fighting Visor 3 and dying, and he gets taken by the Elmas, and Elmas is like, your story ends here, but you have done a lot, that changed a lot. We learn that Lauren is the mother of Tobias, and Tobias is Alfangor's son, Axe's nephew, right? Yeah. And Alfangor learns about this, and we have this conversation with him and Tobias, which in the first book, I'm so sorry, this is so spread out. There's so much in this book. In the first book, there's a moment where Tobias lingers with Alfangor before he leaves, and we get this conversation of Alfangor asking Tobias, how is his mother, how's his family? Tobias says his mother disappeared, his father's never in the picture, and he's like, you're with your own family now, with the Animorphs, they will take care of you. And really sweet moment, really beautiful writing, really long book. There's so much in this book. The Time Matrix takes Visor 33, Lauren, and Alfangor into like this jumbled up mess of all three of their worlds. Really cool moment there. There's so much in this book that I just absolutely adore. S tier for me, 100%. Book 13, The Change, is going in morphed into a dolphin. We have Tobias in the POV dealing with all of a sudden 2 Hork-Bajirs that have appeared in the forest as free and no longer being controlled by Yeerks. The Animorphs are trying to understand why these Hork-Bajirs are free and how to help them, and they're being pursued by the Yeerks. And so there's a moment where the most important part for me is that the Elemist appears once again and tells Tobias that he needs to help the Hork-Bajir establish a free colony, and by doing so, he will give Tobias what he wants the most, which Tobias says he wants to be a human once again. And so the Animorphs and Tobias mainly help the Hork-Bajir run away from the Yeerks, escape the Yeerks, fight the Yeerks, and at some point they find a valley that the Elemist and Hork-Bajir technology, or Andalite technology, I think, I forget exactly how, but they create this valley that the Hork-Bajir can live freely. And so we get information about the Hork-Bajir that they are actually a pacifist species that use their blades to remove bark from trees because they are vegetarian. And the Yeerks had simply used the Hork-Bajir as shock troopers because of their blades, but they're not actually violent. They want to be free. But they have this idea now that to be free is the most important part, death or freedom for the Hork-Bajir. And the 2 Hork-Bajirs, it's a male and a female, and they establish this colony that is hidden from any Yeerks or humans as well. There's a moment where things go bad, and Yeerks are attacking, and Tobias gets injured, and the Elemist says, okay, I will give you what you want most. And Tobias is like, no, I cannot be a human right now. I need to help fight. And the Elemist is like, I'm giving you what you want the most. And he gives Tobias the power to morph again in exchange for helping the Hork-Bajir, because the Elemist wants to preserve species. And so Tobias now learns how to morph, and there's a really cool moment where Tobias gets injured and he starts morphing. He morphs into a raccoon to save him from being injured. He can't transform into a human, however. His base form is the red-tailed hawk. And so he's learning how to morph again, how to deal with the instincts of different animals, and comes to save the other Animorphs and the Hork-Bajir from like a Yeerk attack, and he gets his morphing powers back. They establish the Hork-Bajir free colony, and everything's good and fine in the world. The Elemist talks to Tobias again, and Tobias is like, "You lied to me," and the Elemist is like, "No, I said I would give you your morphing back, and that's what you wanted the most. Not that to become a human." But to thank him, I guess, the Elemist has this weird like dream moment gives to Tobias that he is a red-tailed hawk, goes to a window, which is where Tobias human is sleeping, and he sort of sees this as a memory that happened to him before. Of the bird goes up and acquires Tobias's human morph. And it's a memory slash dream slash time messing around, and it turns out he can now turn into Tobias once more. There's a really sweet moment where there's like, I think there's like a celebration at school at the very end, and he shows up as Tobias, and he and Rachel can hold hands once more because they're having this sort of relationship starting to grow. And it's a really cool, good moment of the Elemist being a shit bitch and lies to Tobias but gives him morphing powers. And now we have this really interesting conversation within Tobias of, should I keep having morphing powers, but have to stay as a red-tailed hawk always, as like the base species, or turn into a human, stay for the 2 hours and stay as a human, but never morph again. He decides to stay as a red-tailed hawk and have the morphing power so he can still fight with the Animorphs, which is a really interesting conflict that he has within him. So yes, this episode, really good, A tier. Episode 14, The Unknown, is going in reach the 2-hour time limit. The Animorphs find out, it's POV of Cassie, that in this plains area that's sort of like Arizona, Nevada type, there's a bunch of horses there, and it's not Area 51, it's called something else, Area 91, I think, and they get tipped off by the Chi that some alien object has crashed in, and they can use this alien object to show the world that they're being attacked by Yeerks. They also find out that the Yeerks want to learn what this object is as well, because it is some form of andalite technology. And so I think this book is kind of boring. There's one moment that I like. There's only one moment that I like that has Cassie, Marco, and Rachel getting picked up by government officials. And they're like, "Why are you kids alone in the middle of the desert? Where are your shoes?" Because also when they morph into animals, they can only morph skin-tight clothing and no shoes. So when they morph back into humans, they have no shoes. "Why are you kids here? What are your names?" And Marco and Rachel give fake names, and Cassie struggles with that, and she gives them a name of a famous person. I forget who it is, but it's a famous person from the 90s. And then they ask for her phone number, and she says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the government officials are like, okay. They leave, they morph into flies, and then they escape. So there's a really fun moment there. However, overall, they have to turn into horses to infiltrate the location. They find the crash landing of the alien technology. It's an andalite toilet. And they decide to not do anything with it so that the Yeerks can be distracted by trying to figure out what it is, because they know, like, Axe is like, that's an andalite toilet. They're not going to be able to do anything with it. So let's leave the Yeerks to try to figure that out and be distracted by that, and that takes some time away from the Yeerks. And then they leave. The end. I don't like that. An andalite toilet? Like, okay. I didn't quite like this. Moments with the horses were pretty good. I reached a 2-hour time limit. I'm done with this book. Episode 15, The Escape, is going in morphed into a dolphin. The Animorphs learn that the Yeerks have some sort of underwater facility, and they have to try to figure out what they're doing and stop it. They transform into hammerhead sharks, which whenever they turn into hammerhead sharks, it's really fun because they have such immense strength and power and intelligence as these sharks. It's so cool. But they get captured as sharks, and it turns out that the Yeerks are trying to create this technology to infiltrate the brains of animals that have brains too small for Yeerks to take over, and makes them more advanced, like makes their brains more advanced so that the Yeerks can take them over better. As sharks, they have the little robot go into their ear canal, and they have to morph into something smaller so that they can come out. And they go into the facility, the underwater facility, and they do stuff to sabotage it and stop all of this technology being worked on. However, Visitor 1 is there, and there's a moment where all of the half of the Animorphs, I think it's Jake, Cassie, Rachel, and Marco, encounter Visitor 1, and they see that it is Marco's mother. Rachel wants to kill her, but Marco stops her, and there's this conflict, and Visitor 1 is really smart. She's like, what is happening? She's never seen them as Andalite. Visitor 3 keeps saying that they're Andalite bandits, but she's never seen them, and the way they talk is really odd as well, because usually they have Axe as an Andalite communicate to maintain this idea that they're all Andalites. And so Visitor 1's like, something's off. I think it's Tobias and Axe doing some sabotage. They end up destroying the underwater facility. Water comes in, and Marco, as a gorilla, ends up saving Visitor 1 from the big explosion, but then loses his mother, and she sort of floats into the water, and they're not sure if she's dead or not, but they do see the ship of Yeerks come in and take her body. They're not fully sure if she survived or not, but now all the Animorphs know that Marco's mother is Visitor 1, and so now, before that was sort of like a secret. Marco had told Jake to not tell anybody because he didn't want anyone to pity him, and Rachel talks to him now the same. She recognizes that he does not want to seem vulnerable, and so she does not adjust how she talks, and she's like, it's the same as usual. And it's really, really cool here. And overall, nothing really happens with this book, but the internal conflict of Marco dealing with his mother, the underwater portions are really cool, and the underwater facility is really cool. Visitor 1 is always an amazing part of the books. And yeah, we have now everyone knows that Marco's mother is Visitor 1, so that also adds a layer of complication with missions that they have to do, considering it's his mother there. Book 16, The Warning, is going in cheap pacifism. In Jake's POV, they learn that there is this online forum of people saying that they were taken over by aliens. And no one ever says Yeerks, but they say they're taken over by slugs. And most of the people there are treated like psychos. But there's one kid that seems to be 12, 13, who's talking about his father is acting weird, and he thinks that he's been taken over by these aliens. And so the Animorphs are trying to figure out who runs this forum. Why is this forum here? Is this a trap set by Yeerks to try to find people who might discover them, or is this something else? And they find out that the person who runs this forum online is the twin brother of Visitor 3. We also learned that Yeerks reproduce by having 2 females and 2 males join their DNA together. I think they deconstitute each other and then create 8 children, I think, or a number of children. And this Yeerk specifically is Visitor 3's twin brother. And he hates him because Visitor 3 made him go into a human who just wasn't going to do anything, so just sent him away. Used the human's connections to create an empire and create technology, create this forum. He's like the CEO or the inventor of some technology. And he runs this forum And what he does is he uses his form to find people who are Yeerks, controlled by Yeerks, kidnaps them, and they ask him, like, why do you take them? And they were watching him for over 3 days, and they never noticed him leaving to go to a Yeerk pool to get Conjoiner Rays. So they're like, he's not a Yeerk. They find out he is a Yeerk. How is he not having to go to a Yeerk pool to get Conjoiner Rays? Turns out, when he kidnaps these people that are controllers, he kills the person and cannibalizes the Yeerk. And that's how he's able to survive. So he's this serial killer that they have to deal with. And there's this moral quandary of, should we let him keep doing this or should we kill him? And Cassie and Jake have this conflict within each other because Cassie almost immediately wants to kill this man because he's a serial killer. But Jake is like, this might be beneficial to the overall conflict. And overall, it's a fine story. I think the serial killer angle is interesting, but doesn't go anywhere past this. Jake has to turn into a rhinoceros to crash into the housing of this rich guy because Rachel and Tobias, I believe, have been captured by the Yeerk, and so everything's falling apart. He turns into a rhinoceros. That's a pretty cool moment there. At the end of it, they decide to leave him alone, and Cassie and Jake are like talking to each other, and they're like, I'm sorry that we had to go through this. I'm sorry that we had this conflict. And at the very end, it's implied that any one of the Animorphs goes and commits an arson and destroys the mansion that this guy is in. Does it stop him from being a serial killer? We don't know. But overall, it's fine. It's kind of not really, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for me, unfortunately. But it's not bad. It's middle of the road for me. Definitely the conflict between Jake and Cassie felt a little contrived, and the conclusion at the end was like, yeah, let's just stop this guy secretly by doing an arson. I think it's implied that it's Rachel who did it, but that's ambiguous, which I feel like it's fine being ambiguous. But in the end, cool concepts, not a real cool execution. Like the middle part where he has to turn into a rhinoceros is because he's feeling bad about the mission and stuff. It's fine. 17, The Underground, is going in Reach It 2 Hour Time Limit. We have Rachel, who ends up saving the life of this guy who jumps off of a building, and they try to figure out why he tried to do that. And like they see in the news that he's committed to a mental institution because he's talking about being taken over by slugs. And they're like, hey, what's up with that? And she goes and infiltrates the hospital. They talk with this guy, and he's like, yeah, I ate some oatmeal, and then I changed. And the Yeerk inside me went crazy. And I had to kill myself I had to try to kill myself because the Yeerk was going crazy. And the kids learn that this specific type of oatmeal, this specific type of flavor, makes Yeerks go crazy because it is a form of Conjoiner Rays for them, but it's like an addiction. And it is a crippling addiction. And so now they have to contend with, should we do chemical warfare with the Yeerks? Yes or no? And in the end, they decide not to, but they have to try to see if it works in the first place. And horrifying moments that I like is that they have to turn into moles and dig into the ground to reach the Yeerk chasm. That's horrifying moments there. But otherwise, once they get through there, they are into cave, and that's when Rachel becomes a bat. The chemical warfare with oatmeal, it's maple and ginger flavored instant oatmeal. That's it. That's the flavor. That oatmeal makes the Yeerks go crazy. And my only good moment is when they dig through the ground as moles, because it's terrifying. The claustrophobia and everything is very The Buried, if you know what I mean. But then as bats, and then the chemical warfare as oatmeal, it pushes too far into like absurdity that I don't quite like at all. I think at the end they decide to not do chemical warfare, and the oatmeal is dropped completely. Like the oatmeal is destroyed, and there's no chemical warfare happening. Yay! Book 18, The Decision, is going in morphed into a dolphin. In the POV of Axe, they are trying to infiltrate a hospital to see if this man is like a controller or not. Like he's like a high-powered government official. And they turn into mosquitoes. Now, a thing about that we learn, I think in past books, when they transform, when they morph, the mass of their bodies are taken to subspace, which is this, I guess, fourth dimension space that just sort of floats in the air. And because they turn into mosquitoes, really tiny, much of their mass is in subspace. And as they're doing this mission, trying to figure out if this man was turned into a controller or not, a really small chance, because it's huge, immense space. It's like 1 in like a billion chance that they encounter anything in subspace. Their body's mass encounters anything in subspace. All of a sudden, a Andalite ship passes by. The gravity takes their body mass and, in extension, themselves as mosquitoes to subspace, and they get picked up by this Andalite ship, and they learn that this Andalite ship is headed towards this foreign alien planet where there is a battle happening between Yeerks and Andalites. And the Animorphs decide to help with this combat. And so we have the 6 of them aiding in the Andalite war. They reach the planet, which is mostly ocean. There's a bunch of amphibian-like aliens that are psychic, that are going to be taken over by the Yeerks, and so the Animorphs are helping the Andalites deal with this. At some point, an Andalite betrays them. I believe either was a Yeerk or just betrayed them for the Yeerks. They kill him, and they run away, and they're like, how do we help this war? They find out that they can try to detonate this bomb that is hidden deep inside the planet, and that will help the war effort. And so as they're doing this mission, all of a sudden, the Animorphs, one by one, start disappearing. We don't know why each of us is disappearing. We don't know what's going to happen. They use their Earth animal morphs in this foreign world. I think they use like a dolphin and like bat to navigate into the caves where the bomb is. And at the very end, it's just Axe and Jake, I believe. And they get to the bomb, and Jake disappears. And Axe is like, I have to activate this bomb. He activates the bomb under attack from other Yeerks, and then he gets slingshotted back. And so all this conflict that we learned about of this war, we don't know how it's resolved, because they leave before they see if the bomb helped or not, which is a really cool conundrum. And they go back straight to where they were before as mosquitoes. There was no time change, nothing happened. And they're back to mosquitoes. They find out guy's not a controller. They leave. And they're like, whoa, what the fuck happened? I like how the conflict, we don't know if it's resolved or not. It's up to our interpretation if the war was won or lost. And I really like that. So yeah, I like this episode. It's A tier for me. Book 18.5, In the Time of Dinosaurs, is going in morphed into a dolphin. This is the second Megamorphs. All the Animorphs are told by the Chi that there is some sort of nuclear detonation about to happen in the ocean, and they have to stop it. I believe it's a Yeerk facility that they have to stop, and they go as dolphins into the water, and the nuclear explosion causes another Sario rip, I believe, and they are transported back to the time of dinosaurs. It's specifically 65 million years in the past that they go to. And this is the same type of concept as Book 11, where they're taken to the past. However, they do not have to contend with Yeerks. They have to contend with actual environmental dangers, which to me is a little bit more interesting because the Yeerks are always there. Having this conflict being something else is a lot more interesting to me. Different POVs as well. And they have to deal with dinosaurs. They encounter 2 species of aliens that are fighting. They are completely different species than I've ever encountered. and they help the one species that is good, and the other species is like a hive mind type deal, and the good species is trying to fight against them. Really good conflict, really good use of dinosaur morphs. At the very end, they find out that the only way for them to go back is to use this like energy source to create a rift. However, the good aliens want to use this energy source to destroy a meteorite that is coming. I believe it's Tobias, who knows about dinosaurs, knows that this asteroid is incredibly important to human history because it is the asteroid that begins the dinosaur extinction. And the aliens want to destroy this asteroid, and he lies to them basically. There's this conundrum of, should we help these aliens survive after we help them defeat this other alien species by rewriting history? How will that affect us? Tobias lies to them and say, yes, we use the energy source to put into this weapon to destroy the meteorite, but in reality, they're using it to get back home. And it's a really kind of sad moment that we have to do this to make sure history continues as is. And there's this conflict between the Animorphs that's kind of interesting. And yeah, they use the energy source to go back in time, go back to their present time. And they're like, what happens now? That was a lot. That was heavy. Really cool moments. They also cannot morph back into any dinosaur morphs, which I feel is smart writing. Like, if they transform into a dinosaur in present time, that would draw a lot of attention, and they wrote that away. Applegate writes that away by being like, yeah, they can't morph into any dinosaurs anymore, but they remember. They have full memory of it, which is good at least. There's continuity with that. They mention dinosaurs in future books, so at least there's that. But yeah, I like this execution of going back in time more than book 11, and especially because there's different points of view, people are separated, and a lot of conflicts happening with different types of dinosaurs. Really good book here. Morphed into a dolphin. I'm losing daylight here. Episode 19, The Departure, is going into delicious cinnamon buns. We have Cassie in the POV, who is returning with the other Animorphs from combat, and she is frustrated because she just had to kill a handful of Hork-Bajir controllers, which she doesn't like because she is a pacifist, or wants to be pacifist, wants to not have violence. And she tells the other Animorphs, I'm done with being an Animorph. It's too much for me. And she goes home alone, and they're like fighting with her about it, but she's like, I'm done. She leaves. When she goes to her farm, she is riding on a horse, and as she's riding through the horses, she sees this girl in the forest being chased by a bear. And she helps get the girl away from the bear. The horse knocks her off, and they fall into a river, and the girl gets injured. Cassie's okay, and she's trying to help her survive in the wild. And it turns out that a little girl is being controlled by a Yeerk. And so the girl is like, you're an Animorph, aren't you? You're an Andalite, you can morph. And Cassie's like, you're crazy, you got hit in the head and you have concussion, you're confused. And the girl is like, no. You're an Andalite, aren't you? You're a morph, you can morph. You're a human and you can morph. So Cassie has to deal with this girl who wants to help her survive in this wilderness, but has to pretend to not be an Animorph and wants to help this girl. And they go through a lot together. They have to escape. There's mentions of I think it's a bobcat, wildcat that is prowling around that attacks somebody. And they encounter this predator, and she saves the girl from the attack of the predator. And they're in the wilderness for like, I think 2 days. And she's growing a little desperate because she knows that the girl, the Yeerk, will need to have chondrona rays or else she'll die. And so she's trying to figure out how to save the girl human herself and not the Yeerk. And at some point, Marco appears. And I love this moment because when Marco appears, the Animorphs had been trying to find Cassie because Cassie's mother said that she disappeared and she was on her horse, and so they think that she got lost, and they also know the bobcat or whatever cat is in the area, so they're trying to look for her. Marco appears, finds her, and it's like, I don't know how to explain it. He just appears all of a sudden. It's terrifying because she's trying to make a deal with this Yeerk. She's trying to connect with this Yeerk, trying to understand. And he's like, we have to kill this girl. And she's like, but no, we shouldn't. And a lot of like ethical questions start revolving around them. At some point, the Yeerk named Aftran tells Cassie about the Yeerk physiology and how they're fully blind, and being able to possess another species' brain allows them to see and experience the world as humans do. And they fight with each other in terms of having these arguments of, you are a parasite, you need to stop doing this bad thing. Okay, yes, I am a parasite, but also if I don't take over another person's body, I will not experience life how it should be experienced. I will be blind and deaf to everything without any feeling. You know, there's this moral conundrum within Cassie of like, the Yeerks want to have life, and they go about it by doing these colonialization, taking over different species. And at the very end of it, there's conflict where the other Animorphs arrive and they're like, we have to kill this girl. Cassie's like, we made a deal. We're making a deal. And she tells her that she will morph into a caterpillar and stay for the 2 hours to become a caterpillar forever. Basically the same as the Yeerk. And Aftran will leave this girl alone. She will stop being controlling her, so that Cassie can know how it feels like to be a Yeerk, technically, basically, as a caterpillar, and Aftran will leave this girl alone. They do the trade, basically. They do the deal, and Cassie turns into a caterpillar and goes past the 2-hour limit. And there's a part where the narration is always going to be within Cassie. Like, all of these main books have only one narration. And all of a sudden, we have her turn into a caterpillar, and she's describing the sensations, or lack thereof, of the world around her, and how minimal the instinct is in the brain of the insect, of the caterpillar. And she says she waits for the 2 hours, and everything becomes simple, or something along those lines. Next chapter, Jake. It is his point of view, which, when I was listening to it, oh my god, the change, because that has not happened. Only in Megamorphs has there been different POVs, but this is the first time when all of a sudden there's a change in the point of view, and that meant something to me when I was listening. This is a change for the pattern, and that was so good, so cool. And Jake arrives at the clearing where Aftran, the girl Kelly, is sobbing. She's sobbing on the floor, and there's like a little caterpillar on a leaf. And she says she tried telling Cassie to turn back. I'll do it. Just turn back into human. Don't condemn yourself to this life. But she couldn't hear her because she's deaf and blind and a caterpillar. She's crying. Kelly, the girl, is holding Aftran as a slug in her hand and says she did it. And Aftran was telling Cassie to stop. And when she didn't do it, she came out and returned to a slug in her hand. And the other Animorphs take Cassie as a caterpillar to her barn. Her parents are despondent because she's gone, she's disappeared, and they cannot tell her parents that she's a caterpillar. In the beginning of the book, when Cassie was dealing with killing some Yeerks, also we learn that the Hork-Bajir that she had killed in the wolf morph that she was in was Aftran's brother. That's also an important aspect of this conflict. And Cassie's parents were despondent because their funding for the wildlife clinic was running out. And at the very end of the book, once Kelly is free, she convinces her father, who's rich, who's also a controller. No, he's not a controller. She was a controller. I forget exactly. Whatever. She convinces her father to fund the clinic. It's a good consequence of this interaction. And Jake, who's had this really intimate and actually a close relationship, they haven't been intimate, a close relationship with Cassie. They're not dating, but they're like, they like each other, is taking care of this caterpillar, this is would you still love me if I was a worm type deal. And I think it's like a few weeks that she's a caterpillar and they're taking care of her. They're feeding her. They don't really know what to do. They're sad. Her parents are sad. And the caterpillar, Cassie, becomes a cocoon and then comes out as a black swallowtail butterfly, which is the cover of the book. And Axe is like, what just happened? And they're like, oh, it's part of the physiology of this animal is that it transforms into a different stage of life. And Axe is like, oh, so she can turn back, right? And they're like, what? And he's like, yeah, if you're stuck as a Nothlith, but if you transform into a different species, you get that power back. What? And then they're yelling at a butterfly, Cassie, morph, demorph. And she does. And she's back. And it's a beautiful, beautiful moment of like pure hopelessness in this war between two people who are on different sides, who learn about each other's struggles and learn from each other. And they decide to reach a middle ground. And beautiful things come from this interaction. I absolutely adore this episode because of all of that. And Afshan does come back later. I forget exactly what happens to her after this, but Kelly is no longer controlled anymore. So that's good. Book 20, The Discovery, is going in morphed into a dolphin. This is the beginning of a really interesting arc that encompasses 3 books, which is the David arc. Hi, my name's David too. The David arc is, of this first book, Marco encounters a kid named David who's new at this school. His father, I think, is part of the military. And he had gone into the construction site, I think, and discovered I forget what it's called, the box. It's a box that Fangor had used to give morphing powers to the kids. And so they're trying to get this kid to give them that box, and it just goes off the rails. The kid, David is in his house alone with his dad, and he puts it online that he wants to sell this box or whatever, and Visitor 3 secretly online says he wants to buy it. The Animorphs tried to set up this trap to capture or kill Visitor 3, fails completely. Marco turns into David's snake pet. Really cool moment that the snake is specifically noted as to be, was it defanged? The venom of the snake was removed, but when Marco turns into the snake, the venom stays because it's like reverting to like the original DNA, which is wants to have the venom sacs. Jesus. A battle happens within David's apartment that completely destroys it. David's father is taken over, and the Animorphs take David to the barn. And they basically induct him into the Animorph group as the 7th Animorph and give him Animorphing powers, or else he becomes a Yeerk. They discover that there is this meeting between many different heads of state of different countries close to their location, close to the waterfront, I believe. And they have to stop the Yeerk's plan to take and make these heads of state a controller. In this book specifically, they go through attack in David's house and then infiltrating the meeting place. There's a part at the very end where they find the president of the United States in a helicopter, and they infiltrate it as cockroaches, and they find out that that's not actually the president, it's Visitor 3, and they're headed towards the location, the hotel. It's a hotel or something. And all of a sudden, they get like swept off, and the book ends with Marco falling in the air as a cockroach, and it's a cliffhanger. It's a full cliffhanger, which has never happened before. And then the book ends. The next book, 21, The Threat, is going in Chi pacifism. It continues directly from the end of the last book in Jake's perspective as they save Marco from his fall and finish the mission They find out how the Yeerks are trying to take over the heads of state, foil it. It's pretty quick. There's a really fine moment where the Yeerks believe they've trapped the Animorphs in a corner. The Yeerks know, Visitor 3 knows that David was given the morphing power, so he suspects that one of the animals that are in this location is David, and he talks to David and almost convinces him to defect and join the Yeerks. But it turns out that all of the Yeerk forces around them, the Hork-Bajirs and Toxons, are all holograms, and so the Animorphs are able to escape, and they succeed in their mission. And then after that, the story sort of peters around and sort of like ambles around as they're trying to deal with David being weird, being kind of a threat. There's a moment where he, as a new bird, had in last book had killed a pigeon just because he could. The moment where he almost defected, he steals a bunch of stuff as well, and so Jake is like trying to hey, don't do this. We're good people. Do not steal. Do not kill. And David's like, you're just being a sucker. I'm gonna be cool and do what I want. Just the vast stuff that's happening in this one book kinda brings it down for me to like cheap pacifism, but it's a transitionary moment between the first book and the next book. But whatever. Rachel and Jake's cousin has an injury and is in a hospital, and David infiltrates the hospital, kicks the cousin down an elevator shaft, and morphs into the cousin. And they're like, hey, this is fucked up. Do not do this. He's like, well, I'm gonna go and tell the Yeerks that about you and your families. And Jake has to fight him. And it ends on another cliffhanger with Jake following David to like a mall, and Axe is there as well. And Jake is fighting David in two different, like Jake's a tiger and I think David's a lion. And he tells Axe, go get Rachel, go get Rachel. And he fights David and loses, and he starts to die, and we get another cliffhanger. And the book ends there. And then we get to book 22, The Solution, in Rachel's POV, with Axe going straight to Rachel's house and getting her to go to the mall and save Jake. Prior to this, there's been conversations of like the violence that they have to do in this war, and Rachel has been the one that has fully embraced this warrior lifestyle. Like Marco keeps calling her Xena Warrior Princess. And so there's a moment where Rachel sort of asks herself, why would Jake call for me? Because he knows that I will do what is necessary. So good. Oh, I forgot to say this is morphed into a dolphin. And throughout the book, after she saves Jake from the attack in the mall, there's moments where she encounters David and they threaten each other, but they reach an impasse. And the tension grows more and more as Rachel begins to embrace this warrior side of her, this angry side of her. The issue of David gets harder and harder to deal with, and they come up with a plan to make a deal with David to get the cube that gives morphing powers, because he wants this cube. And they make a deal with him, and he's like, I know exactly what you can do, so you're going to turn into a mouse, and you're going to show me where you hid this object, and I'm going to keep you in hostage, and if anyone else does anything, I'll kill you as a mouse. And they trick him into morphing into a mouse as well. Oh, at this time also, there's a moment that in the book prior that Jake discovers a red-tailed hawk mangled and killed. And it's believed, David thinks that he killed Tobias. And so they use the secret of Tobias not actually being dead, because David thinks that he killed Tobias, to trick him and capture him as a mouse in a tight tube. And they keep him in that. Rachel specifically turns back into human, keeps him trapped in this tube, so that if he wants to turn back into human, he'll be crushed, or he stays for 2 hours. And it's through Rachel's ruthlessness that she's able to ignore his cries for help and force him to stay as a mouse. It's amazing moment of Rachel's warriorness. And then they leave David as a rat on like an island, and that's how they deal with him, which is, I love that moment so much. Overall, the David saga, the books 20 to 22, is like S tier for me, but like individual books, A, B, A. Book 22.5 is the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. Delicious Cinnamon Buns. This was the second book that I had skipped. This is literally the last book that I listened to fully before recording those. And it is the story of Aldrea, who is the daughter of Ciro, who meets Dakami, who is a Hork-Bajir seer. Every 1 in 1,000 Hork-Bajirs are born with higher intelligence, and they are seers, and they're meant to help the population encounter challenges and learn and stuff like that. And so it's the love story of Aldrea and Dakami on the Hork-Bajir homeworld as the Yeerk Endlight War begins, and the Yeerks are trying to figure out how to advance their species. They learn about the Hork-Bajir, and they attack the Hork-Bajir planet, and it is like the beginning of this war. And it's beautifully written. It's the relation between Aldrea and Dakami is so beautiful. It's so poignant. There's so much conflict within them, but they also understand each other. And at the very end, we learn about Prince Oberon. We had learned before in Andalite Chronicles that Prince Oberon had done something really bad to be disgraced. And I didn't want to spoil it in Andalite Chronicles, but here we get the full description of him creating a quantum virus, which was created to destroy the Hork-Bajir species so that the Yeerks did not have any shock troopers to take over. He tried to commit a genocide. And Aldrea and Dakami tried to stop him, but ultimately fail. Aldrea becomes a Hork-Bajir, but stays past the 2 hours, so she becomes a Nothlid. And they fall in love with each other, have children, and their great-great-grandchild, I believe, is the Hork-Bajirs in the Hork-Bajir colony. Like, the framing device is Tobias is like restless and wants to talk to somebody different, goes to the Hork-Bajir colony, and they tell him about this past. And they learn that the child of the 2 Hork-Bajir that were free is named Toby, a girl named after Tobias, and is a seer as well. And so we get this story of Aldrea and Dakami, and it's absolutely beautiful. I absolutely adored this story along the same lines as Andalite Chronicles, but also it's slightly shorter, but it's more melodramatic, and also it's great history, lore. The POVs are split between Aldrea, Dakami, and Esplin. I looked it up, which is Visor 3 eventually. At this point, he's just sub-Visor 16, I think. Esplin is also the POV, which we get a lot more descriptions of how the Yeerks perceive their world around them. We learn that the Hork-Bajir were created by this other species called the Arn, which reside in lower levels of the planet. That created the Hork-Bajir to strip the bark off of the trees to make the planet more hospitable. And we learn more about the Hork-Bajir colonies and cultures and the history. It's a beautifully written story, and I absolutely adored learning about Aldrea. And spoiler alert, I had listened this since I said this is the last book I read. There's another moment where Aldrea appears later that I was confused, and I should have read this before, or should listen to this before I got to that story. But it is what it is. Amazing writing, amazing story, amazing characters, amazing world building, amazing lore drops. Everything is so good with this book. Book 23, The Pretender, is going into pacifism. This book, I liked it a lot more before I read Andalite Chronicles, because we have Tobias POV learning that there's this woman who says that she's his father's sister, his aunt, and wants to take care of him, but she's looking around for him. She can't find him. and he's like, he and the other Animorphs are trying to figure out if she is the real deal or not. To me, if I had known about Tobias's parentage before this book, I would have had this sort of dramatic irony of, I know that this woman is not his father's sister, and when are they going to figure that out? But at the same time, they're dealing with trying to find Toby, who had accidentally left the Hork-Bajir colony and was taken by some like freak show people, and they're trying to find Toby at the same time. And so there's this question of, obviously, is this woman actually real? But if I already knew about Tobias's parentage, we already know that. And I feel like if you want to have this dramatic irony, focus only on this dramatic irony and not have something else happening alongside it, because it distracts. And so without knowledge of Animorph Chronicles, there was a really interesting mystery alongside the conflict of trying to find Toby. So to me, it was really fun to learn that Tobias is Elfangor's son and Axe's nephew. But after reading Animorph Chronicles, which happened many books prior, it kind of loses its impact, because we know from the get-go this woman is not anybody. It's actually, I mean, the question of like, who is she actually is she's Visor 3, obviously. That's less of a surprise now as well. And so overall, I think, it was a really good book in of itself, and would have been better without the knowledge of Animorph Chronicles. With the dramatic irony added onto it, I don't quite like it that much, but I still honor how much I enjoyed it, so it's middle of the road for me. Book 24, The Suspicion, is going in Yerk's Scum. I'll make this quick. I don't like this book. Helmicrons appear. Cassie encounters these tiny, tiny aliens that make people tiny, and they're trying to steal the box that can give Animorphing powers. They're Helmicrons. They make people tiny, and they make half of the Animorphs tiny, and they're dealing with tiny, huge stuff happening. I don't like the Helmicrons. Nothing happens in the end. They defeat the Helmicrons. She turns into an anteater and licks and eats the Helmicrons, and that's how they defeat the Helmicrons. They were doing stuff that was interesting in terms of having some of the Animorphs be really tiny and having to deal with other animals and Yerks that are super huge, or like relatively large, like huge spiders. But like, I read Micro by Michael Crichton, and that was a much better execution of this concept and much more terrifying than what happened in this book. And I don't care for the Helmicrons. They're so annoying. I think it odds that Daniel voiced them really annoying, but I don't like them. I don't like how they're written. I don't like them as, I mean, they're written fine. They're written really, really good. They're written to be annoying, but I don't like how annoying they are. So yeah, I don't want to ever return back to the Helmicrons. I hate them so fucking much. Book 25, The Extreme, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin. We have the Chi going up to Marco, who's a POV character, and the other Animorphs, and they tell them there is this facility that we don't know where it is, but it's the Yerks are doing something. So you have to board on this ship and try to figure out what it is. We, the Chi, will pretend to be you, and so you can take as much time as you want to find out where this facility is, stop it, and then you can come back, and nothing changes with their lives. Turns out the facility is in the North Pole. Yeah, the Arctic, because Antarctica means no bears. There is bears, so it's the Arctic. And it's a similar concept to book 11 with dealing with the elements, the outside forces, the cold, but learning and adapting and gaining morphs that will help them. In the beginning, they use wolf morphs to help them combat the cold until they were able to morph into seals, and then they were able to morph into polar bears, and then they were able to reach this facility where the Yerks were and destroy the facility, and it's all good and all fine. And I really liked that they had to learn and evolve, basically, in this hostile environment. Really cool moments. I don't remember exactly what they were doing there. Also, there was a different alien species that Axe said was extinct, and it turns out the Yerks had bred new forms of this species. I forget exactly what it is, I'm so sorry, but they are specifically made for the cold, And anytime that the Animorphs encountered these alien species that were enslaved by the Urks but not controlled by the Urks, if they were encountered with any heat, they'd immediately melt, which is really fun imagery. Also really sick and twisted and disturbing. But yeah, I really liked how they had to deal with the environments here, and it was frustrating not having any morphs that can deal with the cold. And then once we get to the seals, they were starting to move. And it felt like a video game to me in terms of starting off a video game, starting off not having enough resources, and eventually you gain those resources and gain the power to be able to face the issues and the problems ahead with more power. And it felt like a video game to me. So I really liked it. It's A tier for me. Book 26, The Attack, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin. We're in Jake's POV as he has a dream of seeing like somebody smiling at him, talking to him in a very threatening way. Like I think it's like described with like huge eyes and threatening tone. And Elmas appears and tells him like, "Hey, I made a deal with the Kryak, which is a different, super powerful species like the Elmist. I'm going to pit you against the Kryak's forces in battle. And you got to win. Here you go." They're taken to a different planet occupied by the Iskort, which are described as this really weird combination of different animals. They are a mercantile capitalistic society that separates all of their people into like different castes, and they just do capitalism, but like in a different way. And they're transported to a separate world, separate planet, to fight these other alien species called the Howlers, which are described as like monkey-like, but have painful screeching sounds coming from their mouths that help them stun their prey and so they can kill them. And so they're like highly trained, highly deadly, never lost a battle type aliens. Since I'm looking up right now, it is actually 7 people that they take. It is the 6 Animorphs plus Eric the Chi. And it turns out the Eric the Chi knows that the Howlers were the species that had almost killed his creators, and so he's dealing with that conflict as well. And the Animorphs are trying to fight these Howlers, and they keep losing, and they keep escaping with barely the skin on their teeth. Is that the term? It's deadly. It is hard to surpass all of this, and they don't know what to do. And so Jake ends up outsmarting one of the Howlers and is able to kill him and acquire the morph. And he learns that all of the Howlers have this like internal connection with other Howlers, and they learn from other Howlers, and it's sort of like a growing information of how to better kill things. And he learns that the Howlers have no concept of what they're doing. They are like children, and they are having fun. And so he sees that if they teach them about empathy, if they teach them about being kind and stuff, that would stop the Howlers. There's a moment where when he kills one of the Howlers, all the other Animorphs think he dies, and Jake comes back to them, and Cassie's so overjoyed, she tackles him and kisses him, and we get the first Jake and Cassie kiss, which is so nice. And so like they're in a different place, they're in a different world, a different situation, and tensions are high, and they finally give in to what they want from each other, and they kiss, and it's a really nice moment. In the end, Jake manages to convey the ideas of empathy and passion and love to the other Howlers, and so the Kryak has to kill his Howlers, because if that virus spreads through the other Howlers, they will not be effective anymore, effectively beating the Howlers. And Elmas is like, this is good, this is what we wanted. And the Kryak is like, fuck you, because I think when Jake had died in book 11, he had briefly seen the Kryak, and so he keeps having this dream. But anyways, a really cool here is they also learn that the Iskert are technically a symbiotic species. It's an Isk and an Ort, I think, and they learn that they were a species before that had communed with Yerks, and eventually they biologically changed to be a symbiotic species. The Yerks within them cannot survive without the original species, and vice versa, and they become this singular species, Iskort. And so the Elmas wanted to save this species because it's a sign to the Yeerks that they can coexist and that this species can show in the future how peace can be reached. And so it's a great setup for future moments. We don't come back to them at all within these books, but great potential in the future. And I absolutely love this biological explanation of it's a symbiotic species. So cool. Book 27, The Exposed, is going and reached a 2-hour time limit. It's a fine story. It's in Rachel's POV. The Chi tell them that they have to go underwater to this facility that is actually the Chi's original ship to reactivate it and make sure that the Chi can now move once more because they were frozen for some reason. And there's this ticking time clock, rising stakes of they need to fix this ship before the Chi that is working in the nuclear power plant gets discovered by humans. And I feel like that was contrived. And I'm like, could you not have found a different ticking time clock like the Yeerks themselves? They turn into squids. They go underwater. They're trying to find a squid to be able to morph into a squid is a fine moment. And they go into the underwater ship, and the Yeerks attack. It's kind of simple. Oh, the Droid. The Droid appears here too. The Droid is a different species. Daniel performs it in a really cool way with like voice modulation stuff.
Haven't figured it out yet? Oh, so slow. Allow me to introduce myself.
It said.
I am the Droid. It's a word from my species. It means wild card.
I believe it works for Kryak. It's like a trickster being. And it sort of saves the day. They fix the Chi problem. The Yeerks leave. They leave. It's not very memorable for me beyond the Droid, and the Droid has a much better moment later. So it's just kind of, I don't quite enjoy this episode. It's kind of boring, honestly. The squid moments are pretty cool. The underwater ship has an annoying AI that they have to deal with as well. And yeah, it's just not that really fun. I'm like, can we find like other stakes to deal with beyond just like, oh no, the Chi are going to be discovered by humans. They're frozen in a supply closet. Like, come on. Book 28, The Experiment, is going in Yeerk Scum. It's an Axis POV, and we learn that the Yeerks are trying to create this food technology that will reduce humanity's free will so that it's easier for them to take over. Which I feel is a stupid attempt, because throughout the series, we have not seen the Yeerks struggle with taking over a human brain. Like, there's so many human controllers. Like, it does not make sense for them to try to find something to break free will. I don't, that's boring. And then they have to turn into cows, and they go into a processing plant, and it's scary cow slaughter almost happens to them. And turns out, no, it's not, it's never gonna work. And the Yeerks who are being threatened by Visitor 3 are like, I'm sorry, Visitor 3, this is not gonna work. And he's like, I will kill you if this doesn't work. And then they encounter the Animorphs, and the Yeerks there are like, well, you're gonna kill us, or he's gonna kill us. And they're like, well, actually, if you run away and don't do anything, we won't kill you. And you can survive on your own, figure out your own thing, and stop trying to find something to break human will. And they're like, okay, bye. They also managed to save some homeless people that were captured as well, which is good. But like the entire thing with like the cows was so boring, and I didn't care for it at all. I didn't care for any of the we're in a factory. No, I'm sorry. I just did not like. Mostly it was just the setting and the concept. Sorry, I just didn't like it. Book 29, The Sickness, is going in delicious, delicious cinnamon buns. It is in Cassie's POV, and she gets contacted by a Yeerk named Ilum, who tells her that, hey, Aftran and I are part of the Yeerk freedom movement. That's not the exact term of this rebellion, but it's a rebellion within the Yeerks. And she's been captured by the Yeerks and is said to be interrogated and executed. So you have to go save her. And Cassie's like, okay, I'll do that. At the same time, all of a sudden, Axe gets sick. And then I think it's Rachel gets sick. And then Tobias and Jake and then Marco gets sick. And they keep getting sick throughout the book. And Cassie has to deal with this mission alone to save Aftran at the same time as dealing with this sickness. At one point, she has to do surgery on a grape. I'm kidding. Surgery on Axe, which was so intense. She ends up working. Cassie is such a powerful person. I love Cassie so much. The way that she was able to do surgery on a grape, in the end, she breaks one of her own rules, which is to not turn into an ant, because she reached the Yerk pool. There was no ants around. She said, I'm going to turn into an ant so I can glide on top of the water, find Aftran, free her, escape, all by her own. She almost gets killed like twice. She frees Aftran, they escape, and everyone is cured of the sickness. I absolutely adored this double stakes happening at the same time, with Cassie having to deal with this on her own, especially coming off of book 19, where she was saying that she did not want to deal with Animorphs anymore, the war, and also the consequence of Aftran being part of the rebel movement now. And at the very end of it, they're trying to deal with Aftran, and so they give Aftran the morphing power, but they force her to become a whale. But it's a good consequence because whales have much more senses than what Yerks have. And so she agrees to become a Northland and become a whale. And it's a beautiful moment that, yeah, they kind of do condemn her, but she is absolutely agreeing to do this. Oh my god. Also, Cassie turns into a Yerk. That's a Yerk on this cover, which is so cool. That, we've gotten them turning into animals, we've gotten them turning into humans, into dinosaurs, but into actual alien species, a Yerk. And she goes into the brain of Ilum's host, who is one of her teachers, to be able to get to Aftran. Great moment, great heist, prison escape type story, and great conclusion as well to the Aftran storyline. I don't know if she pops up later, at least not within these few books, but I don't know if she pops up past book 35. Book 29.5, Alfangor's Secret, is going and morphed into a dolphin. I like this book a lot. However, it's a little confusing, so bear with me. So we begin with a weird start, and I think it's in Tobias's POV that we start with, and he's thinking about this war between the Yerks and Animorphs. And he talks about, whenever I want to finish, I want to be with Melissa. And I'm like, Melissa? Melissa was Rachel's friend, who is Chapman's daughter. And he's like, oh, I want to be with Melissa when we finish. And I'm like, huh? And then it goes into Jake's POV, and he's talking with Cassie in the barn. And Cassie turns to her slave and tells her, you can go now. And the slave is like, okay, and leaves. And the Jake is like, yeah, they're dealing with this war, but also the Americans, or the Empire, is fighting in the South America, and this slave was part of that. And then Melissa appears, and she's like, where's Tobias? Tobias comes, and they're like together. Things are weird. And then the Drode appears and is like, hey, so this is an alternate universe. This is all wrong. Let me fix this for a moment. Melissa disappears, replaced by Rachel, normal Rachel. And they all sort of realize, like, what the fuck? Why do I have... Cassie's like, why do I have a slave? And the Drode is like, yeah, so Visitor 4, who's taking over this actor guy, has found the time matrix and has gone back in time and rewritten history. So you guys, the 6 of you, have to go and try to find him. I just found this out. I didn't consume this when I was listening to it, but it turns out, yes, this is an actual consequence of the decision where Visitor 4 was demoted for losing the planet Lyra, which is the planet that they went to in the decision. Had not consumed that when I first listened to this. So I'm learning that now. Really cool moment here. And the Visitor 4 has rewritten history. You have to go back and change stuff now. And so they make a deal with the Drode and by extension the Kryak. And the Kryak is like, you can rewrite history, you can fix history, but one of you has to die. Period. And they're like, that's a high price. And they all like sort of turn to each other, and they know that Jake is going to sacrifice himself to do that. And they don't want to have to deal with that, but they still want to try to fix history. And so they go back in time in multiple different time periods. In 1450, in the Battle of Agincourt, and they discover Visser 4 there, and they fight him. He tries to kill King Henry V, and they get transported to 1776, where George Washington is crossing the Delaware, and they find out that Visser 4 had tipped off the Hessians that the Americans are fighting, and so that causes a change in the battle. And I think George Washington is maybe killed, I forget exactly. Jake is shot and dies, and everyone's panicking. They're connected to the time matrix. They are transported to 1805 in like a ship battle, and they're fighting Visser 4 and also other pirates and stuff. And they find out that Jake dying fulfilled the promise, but the Ellimist who is helping them made a sort of like a clause that, you know, only one of them will die. Only one of them. So they have the rest of them have basic immortality. And so they keep going through different time, trying to fight and find the time matrix and Visser 4, and they keep dying. At some point, Rachel as a bear is exploded and dies, but she comes back to, she comes to in the next place that they go, which is in Cambridge, Princeton, 1934, because Visser 4 wants to kill Albert Einstein. And they use this power to find and defeat Visser 4 finally in 1944, where they encounter World War II. There's really cool sequences in D-Day, I believe. They find Hitler, who is not the leader of Nazis. He is simply a driver. And they find the Visser 4. Do they kill him? They don't kill him. They take the time matrix and go back in time to make sure that the actor's parents never meet, basically killing Visser 4. And they return everything back to normal. Crazy book. Crazy stuff happening. And it's really good. Probably one of my favorite Megamorph. I think it's this Megamorph, Time and Dinosaurs, and then Like Gift. Yeah. That's it. I lost my son, so I have to turn on the artificial lights now. Book 30, The Reunion, is going in Morphed into a Dolphin. Another Visser 1 appearance. So we're in Marco's POV. He's walking around one day, and he thinks he sees his mother, which surprises him, because he's like, well, what happened at the end of the attack underwater when she was taken away? What happened to her? And so he ends up following her and tells the other Animorphs, hey, I think my mother is free maybe? I don't know what's happening. And he follows her around in like an office building, and turns out that she has practically defected against the Yeerks, but is still anti-Animorph. She's still like kind of fighting for the Yeerks, but like at least she's running from Visser 3. And so he finds that she has like a portable Yeerk pool, and he like encounters her in his gorilla morph. He makes a deal with her that they will work together. He will show her the Hork-Bajir free colony, and she will set up Visser 3 to be killed by the Animorphs. And so this begins this really intense mission building, planning, and execution of trying to take Visser 1 to the Hork-Bajir colony without her knowing about the human Animorphs, and knowing that the Animorphs are planning against her because they plan to kill both her and Visser 3. There's like these like spy moments where they're like pretending to be Andalites and telling her to do this, do that, go here, go there. And they're kind of playing around with her. And, you know, Marco's trying to deal with, might have to kill her or might not have to kill her. I don't know. And they reach the Hork-Bajir area, not the valley itself, but like the mountain. And the car that Jake and Cassie were part of explodes when Visser 3 and his Yeerks attack and try to get Visser 1. And so they all think that Jake and Cassie have died. and Marco's increasingly more and more alone. They work with the Chi to create a fake Hork-Bajir colony in a different location. So they're not actually going to the Hork-Bajir colony. She thinks they are, but it's a lie. They get to this location, and Visitor 3 bombs the place and creates huge avalanches that almost kill a bunch of people, and they escape. On the very end, intense moment, they're at the cliff, and Visitor 1 is looking at, I think it's Jake and Marco in Morph. Jake's a little farther away, Marco's talking to her, and she surmises through clues that they are humans. Not only that, Marco, because there was a moment in the past, I forgot to mention, that Marco became a human in the underwater facility and pretended to Visitor 1 that he had become a controller, and she tells him, my host tells me that you're controlling her son. So, whatever, she just thinks he's just a lowly yerk. And she learns that that's a lie, that her host's son, Marco, is an Andalite or has morphing powers. She surmises it all by herself. This bitch is smart. And she's like, I can use this, but I will not tell Visitor 3. And Marco is a goat at this point, and he is about to push her off the cliff, and he hesitates. And instead of him being the one to push her off, I forget if it's either Rachel or Jake. I believe it's Jake. Pushes her off, attacks her as a lion, and she falls into a crevice created from the bombs. And they escape. They run away from the bombardment of the Yerks. Their plan fully fails. They don't kill Visitor 1. They don't kill Visitor 3. And throughout it all, obviously, Marco is like, I'm not sure if I can kill her. And Rachel says she had flown around and tried to see if she could find her body and saw that there was no body there. So it may be that she died when she fell and the Yerks were just cleaning up their mess, or she survived and the Yerks took her, or she escaped somehow. They don't know. And so throughout it all, Marco has this doubt of like, is she alive or not? I don't know. It sucks that this mission fails. The whole like espionage part was really fun, but it ultimately fails. But it doesn't feel like a full like bad thing that it failed, because they learn more stuff and they're prepared now for Visitor 1 in the future. Really, really good. I forget when he becomes a cockroach. I think he's in the office buildings when he's infiltrating the office buildings that Visitor 1 is hiding in. Yeah. Book 31, The Conspiracy, is going and reached the 2-hour time limit. I think that this episode builds off of the last episode, but not in ways that are really entertaining. This is in Jake's point of view. Someone in his side of the family, not Rachel's side of the family, dies. I think his grandfather dies. And so his father and his mother want to go to visit the grandmother for like the weekend. And so they want to take the boys with them. Jake knows that Tom is a controller. Tom does not know that he's an Animorph, but wants to take Jake to become a controller, keeps trying to ask him to come to the sharing. Jake knows that Tom cannot go with them for the weekend because that'll be past his 3-day requirement for conjoiner raise. And so there's a lot of back and forth between Tom and other Yerks trying to deal with this situation. And at the end, they're at the cabin. Or there is a moment that I like where Jake has like a dream of being in the trenches because his grandfather was part of World War II. He finds like a knife of like a Nazi that his grandfather had taken, and he sees his brother in the trenches, and brother's talking like a Yerk. Really scary, intense moment there. The Yerks try back and forth to get Tom to not have to go, or figure out a way to make sure that he's not starved of Condrenas. Jake is worried that they're going to make his father a controller. And in the end, Tom is in the cabins with Jake and family, and he's going to kill his father, I think. There's a moment he takes like the knife that Jake had found. And all of a sudden, the pier that they're on, because they're like on a lake, the pier breaks, he gets injured, and it turns out it was the other Animorphs as like dolphins who break the pier to stop anything bad happening. The Yerks pull some strings to get him taken to a hospital, so he has enough time to do conjoiner raise, and Jake is fine. It's fine. Like, there's the similar question to Marco that was like, I don't know if I can kill my brother or not if it comes down to it. And Marco does it for him, same as Jake did it for Marco, of hurting Tom. And Jake and Marco have this like minute conflict, but overall, nothing comes out of it. Yeah, I'm struggling to find things to talk about with this book as well. So it's just kind of boring for me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Book 32, The Separation, is Delicious Cinnamon Buns. Where do I start with this book? A conflict is set up here that isn't concluded until the next book. The Chi tell the Animorphs that they've learned that the Yeerks are developing a weapon, which is a beam to demorph andalites in morph. And so they want to try to figure out how to stop that. But at the same time, in the beginning of the episode, Rachel, which is the POV character, is in the ocean, but her earring falls out, and she wants to get it because her father got it, and her father's kind of distant, and so she morphs into a sea star to retrieve the earring. In the process of, one of her classmates runs over her and splits the starfish in half. And once the coast is clear, Rachel demorphs. Two different halves of Sea Star demorph. And so now we have two different Rachels. Angry Rachel, and I think Nice Rachel it was called. And it is a split personality type story. And Angry Rachel is combative, impulsive, and thinks short term, while Nice Rachel is weak, pathetic, and thinks long term. And they have conflict with each other. They can both morph. Nice Rachel doesn't like morphing. The other Animorphs are like, what the fuck is happening? There's a moment where Angry Rachel talks to Nice Rachel, and she's like, hey, we can set up a good arrangement here. I take Tobias, and you, Nice Rachel, take Marco, which comes out of left field, but is also really hilarious. I would suspect, watching this sort of story, that like the combative, angry Rachel would be the one to think of betraying the Animorphs. But in reality, it's Nice Rachel who's worried that her life will be messed up and her father wants to visit and she doesn't know how to deal with him. So she wants to tell him about the Animorphs and the Yeerks. And so to do that, she's like, I might as well just give myself away to the Yeerks so that I don't hurt my family. And so there's this conflict of, all of a sudden, Nice Rachel wants to betray the Animorphs, and they're trying to deal with this demorphing ray. They fail because Angry Rachel drives a truck into the factory that they're in. She does save their lives, but also she's a little impulsive. Really cool writing because it pushes how much these different personalities of Rachel are, but specifically, like I said, Angry Rachel is short term and Nice Rachel is long term, and working together within normal Rachel is how she's able to plan and execute. And at some point, both of them realize they need each other so that they can fight in this war. And in the end, the Chi, like, I think, grab both of them and they morph at the same time. And Eric causes like huge amounts of energy to bombard them, and they fuse once more. And a really cool sci-fi explanation. Like, all the series is pretty sci-fi. A really cool sci-fi moment of like split Rachels, two different Rachels. Crazy concept. Sea stars, like, come on. And the internal thoughts of Rachel being personified as Angry Rachel and Nice Rachel. Really good description of who she is as a character. I think out of all of the Animorphs, Rachel and Cassie are the best written, followed by Tobias, Marco, Axe, and Jake. I think Jake's a little too simple. He's just dealing with like, oh my god, I'm the leader. Well, like, Marco's dealing with his mother. Tobias is dealing with being a hawk. Axe is alone. Cassie has really complex motivations. And then Rachel is a warrior princess. She's not a princess, sorry. That's insulting to Rachel. Sorry. She is a warrior through and through. So yeah, this is a really amazing concept, executed in a really fun way. I adore this episode. Episode 33, The Illusion, is going in morphed into a dolphin. The Animorphs are now trying to deal with this demorphing ray now that Rachel's back in one person. They decide to use Tobias, who's always a bird, to prove that the ray does not work, so that they abandon the project. This is the illusion. He morphs into Axe and gets captured by the Yeerks, and he gets tortured. And it is intense. It is intense, this torture scene. It is prolonged. Daniel brings in another person to voice this Yeerk, who is a subsidiary to Visitor 3. Her name's Taylor in the book.
Preppy. Supermodel. Yerk. I was speechless.
Only one of you? And in bird morph.
She sneered.
Oh well.
She continued confidently.
With one in hand, we'll soon catch the others.
And so it adds this level of intensity, having a different voice, while Tobias is getting tortured, horribly tortured. It is intense. I would say all books should have trigger warnings. This is an intense torture of a minor character. The illusion works. Taylor thinks that Tobias is an Andalite who decided to become a Nothlid. She's like, you're an Andalite, you should want to die as an Andalite. And he's like, I'll die before I let you beat me, Yeerk. She's like, spoken like a true Andalite. And he basically tricks her into thinking that the demorphing ray does not work, because they suspect that this red-tailed hawk hit it with the demorphing ray, it'll turn into an Andalite. However, that's the illusion of it, because they also saw him as Axe beforehand, and they succeed in that. But in the end, Tobias is left traumatized. At the very end, Rachel and him have like a conversation, and it's a really nice conversation that sort of establishes more their connection, because they have this sort of want to have a relationship where he struggles with wanting to become a full human so that he can be with Rachel. However, they only have this connection because he's had to deal with being a warrior like Rachel. And so in any normal circumstance, they would not have had this connection. But because he's been a bird for a long time, she's fought with him alongside him. There's moments where she turns into a bird as well, so that it can be at an equal level, at the same time of him becoming Tobias human with her. So there's this internal conflict he has, and he decides to just be who he is for now after this torture. It's a really great conversation after the fact, after being saved, that further pushes their relationship even closer. I think the torture was a little superfluous. Tobias would try to use the instinct of the bird to be separate from, but at some point that fails and he just has to endure the torture. It's like this mental pain that he's being subjected to. And yeah, it's a little too intense maybe. I liked it, but it may be really intense for other people. So, book 34, The Prophecy, is going in morphed into a dolphin. We have Cassie and the Animorphs going to the Hork-Bajir colony. They're summoned because the Hork-Bajirs see a Yeerk ship arriving. And it turns out it's not a Yeerk ship, it's a stolen Yeerk ship piloted by an Arn named Quafaginadon, and this is where I learned that the Arn had created the Hork-Bajir. But if I had read Hork-Bajir Chronicles beforehand, I would have known this before. But at least it's good that they set this up here as well, just in case you didn't read the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. And the Arn says that his species, he's the last of his species, and he wants to atone for the bad stuff that his species had created. And he has a scan of Aldrea's consciousness a few days before she died. He knows that she has information that might show them a stash of weapons that can help the Hork-Bajirs fight against the Yeerks. And so he knows that the scan of Aldrea would go into a female who has strong will, just like her, and it's either Toby, the seer of the Hork-Bajir, or Rachel. But in reality, Aldrea connects to Cassie. And so now the book switches POVs between Cassie and Aldrea. And like I said, I hadn't read the Hork-Bajir Chronicles beforehand, so Aldrea was a completely new character. And her conversations and conflict with Cassie is really compelling, and I really enjoy this conundrum of Aldrea's dead. This is a memory of her, and she knows this, she sees Toby and she knows that they tell her that she's her great-granddaughter. Quafa Jinnajon, the Arn, takes Cassie, Aldrea, and the other Animorphs to the Hork-Bajir planet so that Aldrea can find the stash of weapons that she had supposedly hid to be able to give the Hork-Bajir another fighting chance. And so we as an audience return to the Hork-Bajir planet, having first experienced it in Hork-Bajir Chronicles, and Aldrea describes how much it has changed. And this book, to me, is very similar to The Pretender in terms of sort of pulling from the Chronicles books before, but here with this less of a supposed dramatic irony and more of like a contrast comparison, along with explanations that we would have gotten in Chronicles, but we still got here just in case. And Cassie and Aldrea have conflict within each other's brains. Who's going to take over? Is Aldrea going to let go? In the end, she does. Spoiler alert, I guess. And they find the weapons and return back home. And to me, this being my first interaction with Aldrea was really fun. I really liked her character. She was so complex and so interesting in this book. And then listening to Hork-Bajir Chronicles, I loved her even more. And so, to me, this book does not suffer as The Pretender does in terms of things that we learned from Chronicles to now. So yeah, this book is an A tier for me. And finally, book 35, The Proposal, is going in cheap pacifism. We have Marco's POV, who him and the other Animorphs learn about this TV personality who's basically getting people to go to the sharing so that they can become controllers. And they have to stop him, and they're trying to figure out how to stop him. Marco's dad, I forgot to mention this prior, Marco's dad eventually becomes better, is back into life and stuff like that, so the conflict of his dad being despondent is gone. I think by like the escape, I think that happens, or early on. Marco's dad is better now, and he's dating again, and he's dating a teacher in Marcus's school, and Marco doesn't quite like it. She also has an annoying dog named Euclid, which is the poodle dog in the cover. He has this conflict within him because his father believes that his mother is dead, and so he's moving on, healing, and marrying. He wants to marry this woman. This is the proposal. And Marco knows that his mother's not dead. Somehow she'll come back, maybe, but he knows that his mother's not dead. And so he feels like his father's betraying his mother, but he knows that's not true because his father thinks that she's dead. Marco knows contrary. And so because of this stress, Marco's morphing starts to act up. Somewhat similarly to Rachel's acting up of morphing because of her allergy, but slightly different. This feels more like a blockage within him that won't let him fully morph into stuff, and so he starts having hybrid morphs and stuff like that. And the conflict of the TV personality is solved by him turning into Euclid, the poodle, and making the guy look insane, like wanting to attack and hurt a poor innocent dog. And so they get him fired, so they solve the problem there. And Marco concedes within himself that his mother might not be coming back, but he has to let his father live. And I think that internal conflict was most interesting, having to deal with this TV personality and the things they try to do. Not that exciting, so it's middle of the road for me. This is the last book. As of now, Daniel's putting out every week, or almost every week, 3 to 4 chapters of book 35.5, Visor, because at the end of book 35, Marco gets a call from his mother who asks him for help. And the book ends and says that Visor 1 will return in the next book, which is Visor. And we're still going through this book, so I'm not including Visor 35.5 in this ranking because I haven't finished it, so I can't really tell how I like it. So far, it's been amazing. We learn about Visor 1 taking over humans for the first time, learning about humans, and going to Desert Storm in late 1990s, and learning about the Americans and deciding to focus the invasion on America. I have not been able to finish it, but it's been really, really good so far. But yes, anyways, that's it. This is all. So after 40 books, this is my final ranking, reorganized fully. Pork-Bajir Chronicles, Andalite Chronicles, and The Departure are my top 3 books. These were amazing books. I love them so much. A tier are rearranged around. There's the really kooky, more interesting stories at the front. In the middle, we have the books where they go other places that were really interesting, and then more early stories, early books that were just good but didn't have big impacts within the plot. Middle of the road, I do think that The Pretender with Tobias and the potential aunt is probably the best out of these middle of the road ones. And then The Warning is my least favorite of the middle of the road. Book 11, cool concept, my favorite of the least favorites. And then Underground is my least favorite of my least favorites. And then, honestly, I struggle between Helmacrons and cows as to which one is my least favorite. But yes. So, as I keep listening to Daniel's podcast, as he keeps putting out episodes, I don't know when I'm going to finish with this series because I will be going at the pace of him. I don't know when I'll get to the last 21 books, but I'll definitely make a ranking video of those 21 specifically. Hello, editing David from a different day. Ignore the rain if you can hear the rain. It's raining really hard right now. So yeah, like I said, I don't really know when I'll be able to cover the rest of the 20-odd books in this series. I don't know when I would be able to do a ranking video for the rest of the books 36 to 54. However, I will be talking about each individual book as I go because, as some of you might know, I am releasing every month a reading wrap-up of the books I read in that month, and I'm including the Animorph books in that wrap-up. I've already done a wrap-up for March, which included a little bit more information on my thoughts on the Andalite Chronicles and 35 The Proposal. And in April, I also touched on the Hork-Bajir Chronicles. I'm estimating that Visor will be done by the end of May, and so I'll be able to talk about Visor when I do my May recap. But I will be talking about each book as Daniel finishes them in my monthly wrap-up. So I would take a look at those videos as well if you so desire to hear more about my thoughts about the ongoing series of Animorphs. So keep an eye out for those. And back to my outro. Yeah, I enjoy. Look how many really good books are in this series and amazing ones as well. Once more, shout out to Daniel and the Audiomorphs. Go check out his podcast so you can actually get Animorphs fully. This ranking does not cover whatsoever having actually listened to or read the series, so go check out Animorphs because it is an amazing series. I forgot to mention as well, as we go into the late 20s and early 30 books, most of them are ghost written for K.A. Applegate by different people. She would give a detailed outline for what the book wanted, and they would write for her so that she could have more time on her hands. 25 The Extreme was ghost written by Jeffrey Zuhick. 26 The Attack was ghost written by Laura Batanye-Wise. 28 The Experiment by Amy Garvey. 29 The Sickness by Melinda Metz. 30 The Reunion by Elise Donner. 31 Conspiracy by Laura Batania-Weiss. 33 The Illusion by Ellen Giroux. 34 Prophecy written by Melinda Metz. And 35 Proposal written by Jeffrey Zuhick. I wanted to shout out David Mattingly, who is the illustrator for about 60 of the Animorph covers, having illustrated all 54 main stories and then the Megamorph covers as well. Romas Koulakis illustrated the Andalite Chronicles, Hork-Bajir Chronicles, the Elemis Chronicles, and Visor Chronicles, which is the portrayal of Elfangor with the halo around his head. Oh my god. And then Aldrea and Doc Hami. There's an alternate cover that I couldn't use for these images that had a more muscular looking Doc Hami, and I was like, oh my god, hello. K.A. Applegate also had the co-writer of Michael Grant, her husband, who helped co-write the series. And this is the work of many different people, because looking at the publication dates for all of these books, it is insane. It's almost every month in order: June 1996 and June 1996. So both of them probably came out at the same time. August, October, December, February 1997, April, May, July, etc. It is insane the amount of work put into this series, and I wish more people knew about the amount of effort that Kay Applegate and her team of creators put into this series. So definitely check them out. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, ranking 40 books of Animorphs. It was so much fun. My throat is killing me right now, and I'm so tired, but I had so much fun talking about the Animorph series. I think about the past books and look at the names and the pictures and stuff, and I remember other things that I just have not been able to mention. Small moments between the characters that are really fun. Axe being a human, trying to be a human, and failing. Cassie and Jake moments. Rachel and Tobias moments. Marco and Jake moments are also really fun as well. The Chi pop in and out. Eric is an actually pretty interesting character. Visitor 3, Visitor 1, Tom, Chapman. I forgot he is a important antagonist, like secondary antagonist that they have to deal with a handful of times. There's a moment, I forget where, that they capture him and they threaten to torture him. Axe threatens to torture him so that the Yorkshire focused on him and they can do something else. I forget exactly when that happens, but that was also a really fun moment. The culture of the Andalite scene in Hork-Bajir Chronicles and Andalite Chronicles is amazing. The story of Oberon, the story of Alfangor, Aldrea, everyone is so amazing written, and I am absolutely amazed and floored by how good the series is. Definitely check it out. Anyways, the sun's down. I'm tired. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about my videos. I would love to have some feedback. Let me know if you remember reading any of these books when you were younger. I definitely don't remember reading any of them, but definitely seeing the covers, and so it's really fun seeing how the covers are evolved. Again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.